When I was 12, my older sister, Emma, locked herself in her bedroom for weeks. She wouldn't talk to anyone, not even our mom. In the end, she left home without a word, and after that, we barely spoke again. I honestly thought I'd buried that chapter for good. But now, 10 years later, my phone buzzes, and it's my mom, her voice thick with panic. She's found a hidden envelope in Emma's old room, and it's addressed to me. And, as if that isn't enough, she drops the biggest bombshell: Emma is back in town. I just stood there in my tiny kitchen, staring at the phone, the hum of the refrigerator suddenly too loud. "You need to come home," my mom pleaded. "Now, please." There was something raw in her voice, something I hadn't heard since the night Emma left. I could almost hear her wringing her hands, pacing the faded linoleum back at the house. "What's going on?" I asked, but she just breathed hard for a second, then said, "It's better if you see for yourself. I'll wait for you." I grabbed my keys, heart thumping against my ribs. Outside, the city air was heavy and damp, headlights smearing across wet pavement. My own reflection in the car window looked like a stranger. The drive to my childhood home was only 40 minutes, but my mind was racing the whole way. I kept replaying the last time I saw Emma, her eyes hollow, her voice flat as she told us to leave her alone. She'd changed overnight after her 16th birthday, suddenly private, snapping at questions, skipping family dinners. Then, that spring, she locked herself in her room and refused to come out. Mom would leave plates of food at the door, and I'd sometimes sit in the hallway, trying to slide notes underneath, but she never responded. Every memory of those weeks felt like touching a bruise. The house had echoed with silence, except for the occasional muffled cry from behind Emma's locked door. When she finally left, it was as if she'd taken all the warmth with her. Afterward, we never talked about it. Mom boxed up Emma's things, but she never let anyone touch the room itself. It became this strange, off-limits shrine, the door always closed, dust gathering in the corners. Now, driving past the old maple trees, I felt 12 again, scared and desperate to understand what I'd done wrong. Why had she shut me out? And what could possibly be in that envelope that would make my mom sound so shaken, after all these years? The porch light flickered as I pulled up, moss flitting in the yellow glow. I could smell the faint tang of cut grass and rain-soaked earth. Mom met me at the door, her eyes rimmed red. She pressed a trembling hand to my shoulder. "It's upstairs," she whispered. The air in the hallway was thick with old perfume and something stale, like secrets that had been sealed tight for too long. My footsteps creaked on the stairs, each one echoing through the quiet house. I reached Emma's door, still the same chipped white paint, the little faded sticker that said "Keep Out." My hand hesitated on the doorknob, sweaty and uncertain. When I pushed it open, the hinges gave a soft groan, and the scent of lavender and dust washed over me. The room was almost exactly as she'd left it, except smaller, somehow. Her posters were still tacked to the walls: stars, wolves, a band she loved but I could never stand. A faded comforter was smoothed over the bed, untouched. On the dresser, a half-empty bottle of nail polish sat next to a cracked snow globe. I ran my fingers over the desk, feeling the gritty layer of dust, the edge of a forgotten notebook. Mom hovered in the doorway, twisting her wedding ring. "It was behind the drawer," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I was finally cleaning, and it just slipped out. She handed me the envelope, yellowed, my name written in Emma's looping script. My chest tightened as I stared at it. "Did you read it?" I asked, but she shook her head. "No, I couldn't." I turned the envelope over in my hands, the paper soft and thin, like it might fall apart if I breathed too hard. For a second, I just stood there, the weight of old memories pressing down. All those years of not knowing, of wondering what secret had been big enough to tear Emma away from us. The room felt alive with echoes, her laughter, her anger, the last time she slammed the door in my face. I slid my thumb under the flap, my heart pounding louder than ever. Whatever was inside, I knew nothing would be the same after I read it. And as I broke the seal, I heard the unmistakable sound of the front door opening downstairs, Emma's voice, soft but unmistakable, calling my name. The envelope felt heavier than I expected for such a thin thing, the paper soft and worn, like it had been handled and rehandled 100 times before it ended up in my hands. My name was on the front, written in my sister's looping, unmistakable script, only now, seeing it again after so many years, it almost looked like a stranger's handwriting. I sat on the edge of her old bed, the mattress creaking beneath me, and slid my thumb under the flap. My breath came out shaky. I could hear my mom's footsteps pacing somewhere downstairs, her voice muffled as she made another anxious phone call. Inside the envelope was a letter, folded into thirds, and an old photograph. The photo was faded at the edges, a shot of me and my sister at maybe 8 and 13, sitting side by side on the backyard swing set. I was grinning, gap-toothed and messy-haired. She looked more serious, almost protective. There was a jagged line of handwriting scrawled across the back in blue pen, but the ink had bled in places and I couldn't quite make it out yet. I unfolded the letter. Her handwriting was more hurried here. Parts of the ink looked smeared, as if she'd written it while crying, or maybe with hands that wouldn't stop shaking. "If you're reading this," it started, "then I couldn't bring myself to tell you in person. I'm sorry. You deserve to know the truth, even if it's too late for me to explain everything." My throat tightened. I could smell the faintest trace of her old perfume on the paper, something floral and powdery, barely clinging after all these years. I read on, my eyes moving hungrily over each line. Don't trust what you remember, she warned. There's more hidden here than you realize. Follow the memory, look behind what we were. I glanced back down at the photograph, my hands trembling. That's when I noticed the words on the back. The attic, behind the third beam. For both of us. Just then, the door slammed downstairs. My heart leapt into my throat. I heard my mom's voice, sharper now. She's here, she called up the stairs, and I knew instantly who she meant. My sister. After all this time. For a moment I couldn't move. The air in the room felt charged, like the split second before a summer thunderstorm breaks open. I heard footsteps on the stairs, then the soft click of the door handle. She stepped inside, and everything in me went rigid. She looked older, of course, but not in the way I expected. Her hair was shorter, darker, and her eyes had a kind of tiredness that made her seem both younger and older than I remembered. She hesitated in the doorway, one hand gripping the frame. "Hey," she said. Her voice was so familiar it hurt. I barely managed a nod. "Hey." She saw the photograph in my hand, the letter still open beside me. Her expression flickered. I couldn't tell if it was relief, guilt, or something else entirely. "You found it," she said quietly. I swallowed. The silence stretched between us, thick and awkward. I wanted to say a million things, to yell, to demand why she'd left and never looked back. Instead, I just stared at her, trying to reconcile the girl I'd lost with the woman standing in front of me. The old floorboards creaked as she moved further into the room. She looked around, taking in the faded posters, the neat bedspread our mom must have straightened earlier, the dust motes swirling in the late afternoon light. For a second, I almost saw her as a teenager again, biting her lip, bracing herself to say something she knew would sting. "Why did you do it?" I finally blurted, my voice cracking. "Why did you just disappear?" Her eyes darted away, and she let out a shaky breath. "It wasn't just about me," she said. "I couldn't stay. Not after what happened." I felt anger, old and raw, surge up. "You left me," I said, my hands clenched. "You locked yourself in here for weeks, and then you were just gone. You never even said goodbye." She flinched, but I kept going. "Do you have any idea how much that messed me up? How many times I thought it was my fault, that I'd done something to make you hate us?" Her shoulders hunched. She looked so small, suddenly, for all her new adult edges. "I didn't hate you," she whispered. "I was scared. You don't know what I found, what I heard that night." I stared at her, the words tumbling out before I could stop them. "Then tell me, because all I've got is this letter, and a picture from 10 years ago. What am I supposed to do with that?" She came closer, lowering herself onto the edge of the bed, leaving a careful gap between us. I could feel the heat of her body, the way her hands twisted in her lap. She hesitated, then reached for the photograph. "Look," she said, turning it over so we could both see the back. "I wrote this the night I left. I thought maybe, one day you'd figure it out." We squinted at the message. The handwriting was messier than usual, the words running together. "The attic, behind the third beam. For both of us." I repeated it aloud, feeling the words roll around in my mouth, foreign and familiar all at once. She nodded. "There's something up there, something I found by accident, right before everything." A strange, prickling chill ran down my spine. The attic door had always creeped me out as a kid, the way it groaned on its hinges, the musty darkness, the weird sense that someone had been there before us, leaving secrets in the shadows. "Why didn't you just tell me?" I asked, unable to keep the hurt out of my voice. She looked at me, eyes shining. "Because I thought it would ruin everything. I thought I could protect you if I just left it alone. But I was wrong." For a long moment, neither of us spoke. I could hear the faint hum of the air vent, the distant thud of a car passing outside, the nervous tapping of her fingers against her jeans. Finally, I stood up, clutching the photo. "Let's look," I said. "Let's see what's up there." She hesitated, but then she nodded. "Okay." We didn't say anything as we made our way down the hall, past the family photos lining the walls, smiling faces that now seemed to watch us with a kind of mute accusation. The attic door loomed ahead, the pull string swaying gently, as if someone had just used it. I reached up and tugged. The stairs unfolded with a groan, dust drifting down in lazy spirals. My sister went first, her hand steady on the railing. I followed, the boards flexing under my feet, the air growing cooler and thinner as we climbed. The attic was pitch black, the only light coming from a tiny window at the far end. I flicked on the bare bulb overhead, its glow revealing stacks of boxes, old furniture draped in sheets, and a scattering of forgotten toys. The air smelled of mothballs and dry wood. My sister moved with purpose, counting the beams along the sloped ceiling. "1, 2, here," she said, stopping at the third beam from the window. She knelt down, running her fingers along the floorboards. I crouched beside her, heart pounding. She pressed on one of the planks and it shifted, revealing a narrow gap. Inside was a small wooden box, the kind you'd expect to find in a fairy tale. Heavy, hand-carved, stained a deep, reddish-brown. My sister lifted it out, her hands shaking. I could see her knuckles whiten as she set it between us. "Do you want to open it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, swallowing hard. My fingers fumbled with the latch. It was stiff with age, but finally gave way with a soft click. The lid creaked open, and I stared inside. On top was another letter, older than the first, the paper yellowed and brittle. Beneath it were a handful of objects. A tiny silver locket, a folded piece of newspaper, and a Polaroid photo of two people I didn't recognize. My sister reached for the locket, turning it over in her palm. I unfolded the letter, my eyes scanning the faded ink. It was addressed to our mother. My heart thudded in my chest, a sickening realization dawning as I read the first lines. The letter spoke of a secret, of a child born before either of us, of a decision made in fear, of a promise to keep the truth hidden forever. The names in the letter matched the people in the old Polaroid. I looked up at my sister, her face pale in the attic light. "Did you know?" I asked, my voice trembling. She shook her head, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I found the box that night," she said hoarsely. "I tried to ask Mom, but she just shut down. I thought if I left, maybe she'd finally tell you. Or maybe you'd be safe." I stared at the box, at the evidence of a life we'd never known. The attic seemed to close in around us, the weight of our family's past pressing down like dust in the air. Downstairs, the house was silent, our mom waiting, the truth finally unearthed, our childhood changed forever. And as I held the letter in my shaking hands, I realized nothing would ever be the same. But there, in the flickering attic light, for the first time in a decade, my sister and I were together, facing the truth, side by side. And that was the beginning of something entirely new. The door to my sister's old bedroom was still heavy, its brass handle cold and stiff in my palm. She stood there, just inside the threshold, her hair cut shorter than I remembered, her posture both wary and exhausted. The envelope, the one with my name on it, rested on the unmade bed between us, its flap already open. I held the letter, my hands trembling just enough for her to notice. She broke the silence first. "I never wanted to disappear like that," she said quietly, voice rough. "But I didn't know how else to keep you safe." The words hit me with a strange mix of relief and confusion. Safe from what? My mind raced back to those strange weeks, her silence, the muffled crying, the way she'd flinched whenever Dad raised his voice. For years, I'd told myself I must have done something wrong. But as I looked at her now, I could see the hurt in her eyes had never really been about me. I read the letter again, aloud this time, the paper crinkling as I gripped it tighter. She'd written, "I heard things I shouldn't have, about Dad, about the money, about the night you almost got blamed for something you didn't do. I shut you out because I thought if I took all the blame, it would end there. I thought I could keep you from getting hurt." For a second, the room felt smaller, like the air itself was pressing on my chest. I remembered the accusations, the way our parents fought over missing cash, the way blame always seemed to find its way toward me. My sister had stepped in, absorbed the fallout, and locked herself away. She'd carried the secret that could have shattered us both. I finally looked up from the letter. "You could have told me," I whispered. My voice cracked. "I spent years thinking you hated me." "I know," she said, voice breaking, too. "And I'm so sorry. I couldn't let them turn on you. Not like that." Running away was stupid, but I thought it was the only option. Outside, rain started to tap against the window, soft and rhythmic. I could smell dust and something faintly floral, her old perfume, maybe, clinging to the curtains. The house felt older, but we were older, too. I sat next to her on the bed, and the mattress creaked under our combined weight, the sound oddly comforting. "I missed you," I said, barely more than a whisper. She laughed, wiping her eyes with her sleeve. "I missed you, too. I thought about calling 100 times. I didn't know if I'd ruined everything." We sat there for a long moment, neither of us saying anything, just listening to the rain. It was the first comfortable silence we'd shared in years. I realized then that the locked room hadn't just been hers, it had been mine, too, in a way. A place where I'd stored all the questions I was too afraid to ask. She nudged my shoulder. "Let's not do this again, okay? No more secrets." I smiled, my chest lighter than it had felt in years. "Promise, we do this together from now on." Later, as we carried the old boxes out of the room, laughing at some of her forgotten teenage treasures, I felt something shift inside me. It wasn't just about uncovering the truth, or forgiving the past. It was about starting over, with honesty and forgiveness as our foundation. That night, as I left the house, I looked back at the window of her old room. The light was on, golden and warm. I knew things wouldn't be perfect, but for the first time in a decade, I wasn't afraid of what the past might reveal. My sister and I had unlocked something far more important than a door, the chance to actually be family again.
When I was 12, the night my brother disappeared unfolded like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. It started with the worst fight I'd ever seen, my brother, Daniel, red-faced and shaking, shouting at our dad in the kitchen. Dad's voice was lower, but somehow more dangerous, clipped words echoing off the linoleum. The kind of argument where you could almost see the air crackling with things that would never be unsaid. I watched from behind the doorframe, clutching a chipped mug I'd forgotten to put away. It was thunderstorm dark outside, but inside the house, the only storm was right there in that kitchen. Daniel's fists were balled at his sides. Dad leaned heavy on the counter, armor-plated in silence except for one final, shattering command: "Get out, Daniel. If you can't respect this family, you can't stay." Daniel's reply was a look, a punch of betrayal, and then the sound of the front door slamming so hard it rattled the windows. The rest moved in a blur. Mom sobbing into the phone, neighbors' porch lights flickering on one by one. Rain streaking down the glass as police cars lined our street, red and blue lights painting the walls with dread. They searched the woods and the old canal, but no trace, not a single footprint. His phone and wallet were still in his room, his bed unmade like he'd meant to come back. The days crawled by, grief piling up in the rooms, until only silence was left. I grew up with that silence, an invisible bruise pressed deep under my ribs. My parents never spoke of that night again. At 14, I learned to tiptoe around certain questions and lock away memories like forbidden treasures. But the ache lingered. I'd catch myself staring at Daniel's old baseball glove, or the dented spot in the hallway where he'd thrown his backpack every afternoon, and wonder, did he really choose to vanish, or was there more to the story? Every birthday, every empty chair at holidays, sharpened that ache into something almost sacred. The mystery was a shadow that shaped me, even as I tried not to look directly at it. 12 years slipped by. Now, I'm back in the house, the prodigal daughter come home, not for answers, but because Dad broke his hip and someone had to help. The place hasn't changed much. The wallpaper in the hallway is still peeling at the edges. My old bedroom smells faintly of must and childhood dreams. But the biggest thing is Daniel. His ghost is everywhere. His muddy sneakers still sit by the back door. His senior year trophy keeps its eternal vigil on the mantle, polished but untouched. Dad and I orbit each other like mismatched planets. Sometimes we try for small talk, weather, groceries, the price of heating oil, but it always dies out. One night while I was making tea, he said, "Your brother liked sugar in his tea. You don't." He looked at me, then looked away, and the silence settled in like dust motes. We live together, but we're both alone, tiptoeing over decades of unfinished sentences. The tension isn't just emotional, it's physical. There's a heaviness to the house now, like it's been holding its breath since Daniel left. Every time I pass his bedroom, the door closed tight, my hand itches to open it. I haven't, not yet. I tell myself I'm respecting privacy, but really, I'm afraid of what I might find. Or not find. It was the basement that started everything. I'd gone down there to clear out the boxes and mop up after one of Dad's increasingly frequent spills. The air was thick, dust swirling in the slanted light from a grimy window. My sneakers scuffed across the cold cement. I started moving boxes, old Christmas decorations, my mom's wedding dress in a mildewed box, stacks of yellowing newspapers. When I leaned against the far wall, something gave way with a hollow thunk. I froze. There was a panel, painted to look like the rest of the wall, but not quite right. Heart-thudding, I knocked again. It echoed, deeper this time. My instincts screamed that I should leave it alone, but my hand reached out anyway, fingers tracing the seam. I pressed, and the panel shifted, opening just enough to reveal a narrow, pitch-black passageway. My skin prickled. The air that rushed out was musty, old, but, strangely, threaded with something sharper. A trace of heat and, unmistakably, the smell of bread. Fresh, still sweet. I stepped back, pulse hammering. There was no way this place had seen daylight in decades, so why did it smell like someone had just eaten here? I strained to listen, the silence ringing loud in my ears. I glanced behind me, half expecting to see someone looming at the top of the steps. "Hello?" My voice cracked, barely a whisper, swallowed by the darkness ahead. No answer, just the distant hum of the laundry machine upstairs, and the familiar creak of the pipes. I should have run. I should have called someone. But I just stood there, staring into that secret, hungry dark, and realized, whatever happened here, whatever happened to Daniel, I was finally standing at the threshold of the truth. And someone, maybe, didn't want me to find it. That's when I heard the quietest scrape from somewhere inside the passage, a sound that could have been a mouse, or something much, much bigger. The house was so different at night. I could hear the creaks and sighs of the old wood beneath my feet, and every shadow seemed to crawl across the hallway. I waited until my dad's bedroom light flicked off and his old radio started playing that quiet jazz he always used to lull himself to sleep. My heart pounded in my throat, hands clammy as I tiptoed down the stairs. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone standing there, even though I knew Mom was at her sister's across town, and it was just Dad and me tonight. I eased open the basement door, wincing at the faint squeal of the hinges. The air down there was thick with dust and the faint, metallic scent of old pipes. I flicked on my phone's flashlight and found the spot behind the broken shelving, where I'd seen the strange crack in the wall earlier that day. My fingers traced the seam. I pushed, and the hidden door gave way with a low groan, stale air rushing out like a sigh that had been trapped for decades. Inside, it was colder, almost damp. My beam swept across the small space. A musty mattress in the corner, faded and sunken in the middle, with a pile of thin, scratchy blankets heaped on top. Next to it, a stack of old clothes. I picked up a hoodie and felt a jolt, recognizing the faded band logo on the back. My brother's favorite, the scent of old cologne, undercut by dust, caught in my nose. I knelt and noticed a battered composition notebook tucked beneath the mattress. My hands shook as I opened it. The handwriting was instantly familiar, a mixture of sharp and looping letters that used to fill the margins of my brother's homework. But the entries were off. The sentences rambled, unfinished, as if he'd started writing thoughts he couldn't bear to finish. Unfinished business, the first entry repeated, over and over, before trailing off into a shaky line. Someone's watching me, I hear them at night. Don't trust. That one stopped abruptly. I skimmed further, my pulse roaring in my ears. Some entries were just dates and times. Others mentioned, the watcher, and, the key. The more I read, the more my hands trembled. I could hear my own shaky breath echo in the tight space. By now, sweat was trickling down my neck despite the chill. I wanted to run upstairs, lock my bedroom door, and pretend I'd never found this place. But I couldn't. Not now. Not with so many questions swirling in my head. I snapped some photos with my phone, stuffed the notebook under my jacket, and slipped back out, careful to nudge the secret door until it looked undisturbed. My mind wouldn't shut off as I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. I could still feel the texture of the notebook's worn cover in my palm, the scent of mildew clinging to my clothes. My brother had been here. Recently, maybe. Or, was someone else living in that room now? The idea made my skin crawl. I couldn't sleep. By dawn, my nerves were raw, but I'd made up my mind. Dad knew something. He had to. I found him in the kitchen, hunched over his mug, the radio murmuring low in the background. The sunlight made the lines on his face seem deeper than ever. He almost flinched when I sat down, like he'd already guessed what was coming. Dad, I said, voice barely above a whisper. My throat was dry. There's a room in the basement. Behind the shelves. His hand jerked, coffee sloshing into the saucer. He looked at me over the rim of his mug, eyes wide. What are you talking about? He asked, but his voice was tight, brittle. I slid the notebook across the table. This was in there. It's his, isn't it? He stared at the cover for a long, long moment. His knuckles went white on the mug. That room's always been there, he muttered. Even before we moved in. It's just old junk. Dad. I leaned forward, searching his face. Don't lie to me. When's the last time you were down there? Who was staying in that room? He shook his head, unable to meet my eyes. I told you. I don't know what you're talking about. But his hands were shaking so badly he nearly dropped the mug. His gaze darted to the door, like he was weighing whether to bolt. I pressed harder. Was Matthew there? Did you know he was still here, after all this time? His jaw went rigid. Matthew left. A long time ago. He didn't want to be around us anymore. Each word sounded forced, like it hurt him to say it. The silence stretched between us, heavy as lead. Finally, I said, Dad, if you're hiding something, you have to tell me. Please. My voice cracked at the end. He closed his eyes. For a second, I thought he might actually confess. But then he just stood up, set his mug in the sink, and walked out of the kitchen, leaving me alone with the notebook, and 1,000 new questions. I spent the rest of the day jumping at shadows, both furious and terrified. The sound of Dad's footsteps overhead made me flinch. Every time the house settled, I wondered if someone was in the walls, listening. By midnight, I was wound so tight I couldn't sit still. I was pacing my room, the notebook open on my desk, when my phone buzzed. A blocked number. I frowned. Who would be calling me so late? I hesitated, then answered. Nothing at first. Then, a rasping, metallic voice, distorted, like someone was speaking through a cheap voice changer. Stop looking. You're in danger. My throat clenched. Who is this? Leave it alone. You're not ready for the truth. Go back to your old life, before you end up like him. A hiss of static, then the line went dead. My hands were numb. I stared at the phone, heart racing, trying to convince myself it was a prank. But who would know to call me now? Who would know? I ran to the window and yanked the curtains aside. The street outside was empty, just the yellow glow of the lamplight and the distant hum of a car engine somewhere down the block. My reflection looked pale and wild-eyed in the glass. Was I being watched? Had someone seen me sneaking into the secret room? I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my brother's handwriting, unsteady, desperate, and heard that voice hissing in the dark. By sunrise, I'd made up my mind again. I was going back down there, no matter what. The basement felt even colder that morning. The air tasted flat, almost electric. I crept back to the hidden door, my hands shaking. I pushed inside, phone flashlight sweeping the corners. Everything looked the same, but then I noticed a tiny, blinking red light on the far wall, half hidden behind a paint can. My skin prickled. I knelt and squinted. It was a pinhole camera, one of those mini spy gadgets you see in bad movies. The lens stared back at me, unblinking. I reached behind and found a memory card slot, the card still warm from recent use. I hurried back upstairs, locked my bedroom door, and slid the card into my laptop. The first video was blackness, then a jumbled shot of someone moving into the room, head ducked and face hidden under a hoodie. The camera's field of view was small, just enough to show the mattress and the door. I scrubbed through hours of empty footage, then, a few days ago, a figure slipped in, moved quickly, and ducked out. It could have been anyone. The only detail I caught was a scar along their left forearm, exposed when they reached for the notebook. My mouth went dry. That notebook, the one I'd stolen. Someone had been here, maybe just before me. Or after. What if it was my brother? My mind spun with possibilities. Or, what if it was someone else entirely, using his old things as cover? I watched the clip again. The figure paused, as if listening for footsteps above. Then, with a quick, practiced motion, they slipped out of the frame and the door swung shut. The timestamp was only 4 days old. 4 days. I felt that creeping paranoia again. Someone was still using the room. Someone who didn't want to be found. The notebook was still spread out on my desk, pages covered in my brother's familiar scrawl. I studied the entries again, squinting at the margins. That's when I noticed it, tiny marks at the end of each page, almost like tally marks. Some letters were oddly capitalized, and there was always a sequence of numbers at the bottom of certain entries. It wasn't random. I could feel it. I scribbled everything onto a fresh sheet of paper, rearranging the letters and numbers. After an hour of sweat and frustration, I realized it was a code, a simple substitution cipher, just like the puzzles my brother used to make when we were kids. When I cracked it, my heart lurched. The message was short, hurried, Dad's drawer. Key to all. Trust no one. My blood ran cold. Dad's bedroom. He always kept it locked, even when Mom complained it was weird. I pictured the heavy oak dresser, the top left drawer with its old brass lock. I hesitated. Breaking into Dad's room felt like a line you can't uncross. But the image of my brother's frantic handwriting, and the memory of that warning call, kept pushing me forward. I needed answers. I waited until Dad left for his morning walk, a daily ritual, rain or shine. I crept down the hall, every creak of the floorboard making my heart thud. The door was unlocked for once, but the drawer was sealed tight. I dug through the closet, desperate, and found an old paperclip. My hands shook so badly that it took 3 tries, but finally the lock popped open with a tiny click. Inside, there were stacks of papers, old bills, a yellowed photo of my parents on their wedding day, and something wrapped in an oilcloth. I pulled it out, heart hammering. Inside the cloth was a second notebook, smaller and older, the pages stiff with age. And a single, battered key. I stood there for a long moment, the morning light spilling across my hands, the old house silent around me. I knew this was just the beginning, that every answer would only lead to more questions. But I also knew I couldn't stop now. Not after everything I'd seen. Not with the truth so close I could almost taste it. And as I held the key, I couldn't help but wonder, what doors in this house, or in our lives, had my family kept locked all these years? My hands shook as I slid open the battered old drawer beneath the tiny desk. Dust plumed up, catching the afternoon sun that now streamed in through the lone, cobwebbed window. Inside, bundled with a cracked rubber band, were faded Polaroids, a stack of yellowed envelopes, and a thin, spiral-bound notebook. I thumbed through the photos first, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. My brother, older than I'd last seen him, beard scruffy, standing here in this very room, sometimes with Dad beside him. They looked tired, but in one picture, they almost looked relieved. I reached for the letters next. The paper felt soft and fragile against my skin. Most were in Dad's handwriting, his blocky, familiar scrawl. The first line made my breath catch. If you're reading this, you deserve the whole truth. My eyes danced over the words, piecing together a story I'd never imagined. My brother, after that explosive argument, hadn't just run away. He'd told Dad about threats from someone he'd once called a best friend, a friend who had spiraled out of control, gotten into bad things, and started turning up at our house, demanding money, making veiled threats. Dad hadn't called the police. He believed my brother was in real danger, and instead, they had made a plan. This secret room, hidden behind cracked paneling and the false closet wall, became their safe house. For months, my brother stayed here, slipping out only at night, Dad bringing him food and news. All those nights I thought Dad was just going for a drive or out to the garage, he was helping my brother survive. The notebook held my brother's handwriting, rough and rushed. The last entry was from 5 days ago. To whoever finds this, I'm safe now. I'm sorry for the hurt. I'll explain, if you want to meet. I'll be here Sunday, after dark. The date was today. I just stood there for a minute, holding onto the desk for support, the old wood biting into my palm. The room felt smaller somehow, as if the walls themselves were closing in with all the secrets they'd held for years. My legs didn't want to move, but I made myself leave, heart hammering, the house suddenly echoing with every creak and groan. That night, I couldn't eat. Every noise in the house pricked my ears, every shadow seemed to move. When the clock finally crawled past 10, I crept back to the old closet and stepped through the gap into the secret room. My phone flashlight swept over the walls, chasing dust motes. Then I heard it, a soft cough, the scrape of a shoe on the warped floor. My brother stood there, older and gaunter than I remembered, eyes glistening in the pale beam. The silence was so thick I thought I'd choke on it. "Hey," he said, voice hoarse. I wanted to scream at him, hug him, punch him, cry. Instead, I just whispered, "You were here the whole time?" He nodded, then looked away. "I couldn't let that guy hurt you. Or Dad." He was serious, and I messed up. "Dad said it was the only way. But why not tell me?" My voice broke on the last word. He rubbed his face, the skin raw and tight. "I was going to. Dad wanted to wait until it was safe, but I didn't know how to come back after so long. I thought you'd hate me." For a moment, we both just stood in that tiny room, surrounded by years of dust and secrets. "I hated you for leaving," I said, my voice cracking. "But not as much as I missed you. I thought you were dead." He stepped forward, arms trembling, and we hugged, awkward and desperate, all those years of anger and grief tangled up in one shaky embrace. I heard him sob softly against my shoulder. We talked for hours, piecing together what we'd both lost. He apologized for the pain, for the silence, for all the birthdays and holidays missed. I told him about the ways his absence had carved holes in our family. We argued, cried, laughed when it all got too heavy, and by the time dawn edged its way through the grimy window, we both looked wrecked but lighter. Dad joined us that morning, eyes red but finally honest for the first time in years. He admitted how scared he'd been, how he'd wanted to protect us both, no matter the cost. There were more apologies, awkward silences, but also a sense that the three of us might finally be able to move forward. The house feels different now. Some rooms still hold echoes of secrets and lies, but others are filled with the sound of real voices, real conversations. I find myself noticing the way the morning light hits the hallway, the smell of coffee from the kitchen, the warmth of laughter, even if it's still a little shaky. I don't know if we'll ever be the same family we were, but maybe that's not the point. What matters is that the truth is out, finally, and we're facing it, together. I've learned that secrets only protect you for so long, and forgiveness isn't a single moment, but a choice you make every day. And this old house, haunted as it is, finally feels like a place where we can all breathe.
Last year, on my birthday, my best friend Mia didn't show up. The balloons I'd tied to my mailbox drooped in the muggy summer air, and the homemade cake I'd baked sat untouched while my phone vibrated with "sorry, can't make it" texts. But Mia's silence was different. She'd never missed my birthday before, not once in 17 years of friendship. At first, I told myself she must be stuck in traffic or maybe planning some last-minute surprise. But as the sun set and the last of my other friends left, her absence hollowed out something inside me. I called her 3 times that night. Each one went straight to voicemail. We haven't spoken since. If I'm honest, I've replayed that day in my head 100 times, looking for some clue. Mia was the kind of friend who always remembered my favorite songs and could tell I was upset just by the way I tied my shoelaces. She was impulsive, with a laugh that made strangers glance over and smile. I was quieter, more cautious. She said I worried too much. I said she never thought things through. If we had a fight, it was forgotten the next day. But this time, the silence stretched longer. I started to wonder if maybe I'd missed something big, something that made her want to disappear. This year, my birthday feels more like a hurdle than a celebration. I wake up to gray light filtering through my curtains and the sound of my mom in the kitchen, humming off-key as she fries eggs. The apartment smells like burnt toast and lemon-scented cleaner. No texts from Mia, or anyone else, just a couple of Facebook notifications and an automated email from my dentist wishing me a happy birthday. I shuffle into the living room, dragging my blanket behind me, and think about how birthdays used to feel, like something magical could happen at any moment. I'm halfway through a bowl of stale cereal when the doorbell rings. The sound is so sudden it makes me flinch and spill milk down my t-shirt. I wipe it off and pad over to the door, expecting maybe a neighbor or a delivery for my mom. But when I open it, there's just a plain brown box sitting on the welcome mat. No courier in sight. It's about the size of a shoebox, taped neatly shut. What makes my heart stumble isn't the package itself, it's the label. My name, written in my own handwriting. I pick it up and turn it over in my hands. There's a note taped to the top, folded in half. The paper feels thick, almost waxy, between my fingers. My name is written again, followed by 5 words that make my scalp prickle. From, you, 1 year ahead. I say it out loud, half laughing, what the hell? The sound bounces off the empty hallway, too loud, too nervous. For a second, I wonder if this is Mia's idea of a joke. but she'd always gone for the extravagant: balloons, scavenger hunts, homemade cards with glitter glue. Never something this serious. The handwriting is mine, though. I recognize the way I loop my Y's and press too hard on the downstrokes. My breath fogs the edge of the box as I stare at it, trying to make sense of the impossible. I set it on the kitchen table and just look at it. The box radiates an odd, magnetic pull. My hands hover above the lid, but I don't open it. Not yet. The room feels suddenly smaller, quieter. Even the refrigerator's hum seems to fade. My mind spins. Did I send this to myself? Is this some elaborate prank? I check the postmark, there isn't one. No return address, just my name, my handwriting, and that note. I sit down, running my thumb over the crease in the paper. Memories of Mia rush in, her racing me down the halls at school, daring me to sneak into the auditorium after hours, the last voicemail she left me. Her voice had been shaky, almost apologetic. Hey, I know you're probably mad, but I just need some time. Please don't hate me, okay? I never called her back. Now, with this package in front of me, I wonder if I should have. What if this is her way of reaching out? Or, worse, what if it's not from her at all? The air feels thick, my ears ringing with questions. I squeeze my eyes shut and count to 5. When I open them, the box is still there, stubbornly real. I press my fingertips to the seam of the tape, heart pounding, and ask the empty room, should I open it? The silence feels like it's holding its breath, waiting for my answer. The box sat on my kitchen table for a full hour before I worked up the nerve to open it. The cardboard felt oddly heavy in my hands, colder than it should have been from the walk up my porch. I kept running my thumb over the label, tracing the swoop of my own handwriting on the front. I'd written my name 1,000 times, but never like this, clean, sure, and with a weird old-fashioned flourish I hadn't used since junior high. I grabbed the scissors, sliced the tape, and peeled back the flaps. The first thing I saw was a folded letter, creamy paper that looked like it belonged in a period drama. My stomach dropped. The scent of lavender drifted up, sharp and familiar, making me dizzy with memory. I set the letter aside, hands trembling, and pulled out the small box underneath. Blue velvet, scuffed along the edges. My heart hammered. I knew that box. I'd lost it when I was 10 years old, at the park by the duck pond. I opened the lid gingerly, half expecting it to be empty, but there it was, the locket. It was heart-shaped, tarnished silver, a tiny dent on the back where I dropped it that day. My initials were still scratched crudely into the clasp, but the chain had been replaced. I pressed my finger to the dent, and the world spun sideways for a second, then steadied. I stared at the locket, barely breathing. How is this possible? I whispered. My voice sounded too loud in the quiet kitchen. The hum of the fridge and the far-off rush of cars outside felt suddenly unreal. The letter felt heavy in my hands when I unfolded it. The handwriting matched the label. My handwriting, but older, a little slanted, more tired. I read aloud, voice shaking. If you're reading this, you've already made a choice, just not the one you think. Today you have a chance to change everything. Don't ignore this. Reach out to Mia before it's too late. My vision blurred for a second. I skimmed to the bottom. It was signed, with hope, your future self. I sat back, heart pounding in my ears. My skin tingled as if I were standing on the edge of something dangerous, or miraculous. The words seemed to vibrate off the page, before it's too late. What did that even mean? I hadn't spoken to Mia in almost a year, not since my last birthday. I'd replayed that night 100 times, every cruel word, every moment I could have fixed if I'd just swallowed my pride. The locket's metallic coolness pressed into my palm, and I squeezed it tight, trying to anchor myself. The lavender scent grew stronger, mingling with the faint copper tang of my own sweat. My mind reeled back, years ago, summer sunlight flashing off the pond, Mia's laugh echoing through the trees. We were 9, maybe 10, and inseparable. That locket had been our secret. We'd made a pact: if either of us ever needed help, we'd leave the locket somewhere only the other would find it, a secret signal. We both wore matching ones, and I lost mine the day her parents announced they were moving away. I never found it again. Until now. I could almost hear Mia's voice. It's just a locket, but it means we're sisters, no matter what. She'd grinned, green eyes bright, freckles dancing across her nose. She always smelled like lavender from her mom's garden. But last year, everything fell apart. My birthday party, all the people, the cake, the anticipation, and an empty chair. I waited for her, checking my phone every 5 minutes. She never showed. I called, left a voicemail, something brittle in my throat. The next day, she sent a text, sorry. Things got complicated. I never replied. Later, I saw her tagged in photos from another party that same night, a different friend group, a different world. We'd fought over text, words sharp as glass, and after that, silence. I blinked, forcing myself back to the present. The locket still lay in my palm, glinting in the kitchen light. My phone buzzed on the counter, startling me. I jumped, heart leaping, but it was just a calendar notification, birthday dinner with Dad, 6 p.m. The world felt absurdly ordinary. I picked up the letter again, reading more slowly this time, looking for clues. You know what you're about to do, it said, and you know why it's wrong. Don't let pride make you lonely. Reach out to Mia today, before you can't. Was this some kind of prank? But who would go through all this trouble? How did they find the locket? And how could it possibly be in my own handwriting? I shoved the letter into my hoodie pocket and opened my Photos app. My fingers twitched as I scrolled through old pictures, sunburned cheeks, ice cream smeared on chins, Mia's arms slung across my shoulders. There was one of us in matching pajamas, holding up our lockets, grinning at the camera. I zoomed in on the charm around my neck, the same one now sitting in my palm. My heart twisted. I flicked over to our last texts. Months of silence, then the blow-up last year. I scrolled back, reading the angry words, the half apologies that went nowhere. Should I call her? Would she even answer? A gust of wind rattled the kitchen window, making me shiver. I got up and paced, the old hardwood cold under my bare feet. The clock on the microwave blinked 2:47 p.m. If I was going to do anything, it had to be soon. I started to type a message, hey, Mia. Weird question, but do you remember the locket we had as kids? Then deleted it. Too random. I tried again, I got a package today. It made me think of you. Delete. My fingers hovered, paralyzed. I set the phone down and stepped outside for air. The street was quiet, just the low hum of a lawnmower a few doors down and the scent of cut grass. I watched a pair of sparrows dart across the power line and thought about fate, about chances you don't get back. I wandered back inside and opened a box of old birthday cards, rifling through glittery covers and faded messages. One from Mia, written in purple gel pen, to my best friend, happy birthday. Sisters forever, pact or no pact. I smiled, then caught myself. My phone chimed, a notification from Instagram. Someone I barely knew had posted a story. I almost ignored it, but the thumbnail caught my eye, Mia's face, laughing in the background at a coffee shop I recognized. She was here, in town, today. My breath caught. Of all the days for her to show up in my feed. Coincidence? Or was the letter right? I stared at the screen, heart pounding. I swiped up, watching the story. Mia's hair was shorter, but she looked the same, nervous energy, hands fluttering as she talked. She was with someone I didn't recognize, but the caption read, Reunion Day, never too late for old friends. My chest tightened. I hesitated, then clicked through her profile. No recent posts. I checked her bio, no phone number, but her old email was still there. Should I message her? The letter's warning echoed, before it's too late. I started a draft, hey, Mia. Saw you're in town. Happy birthday, by the way. Can we talk? My thumb hovered over send. My heart jackhammered. What if she ignored me? What if she'd moved on, like those photos from last year? A shiver crawled up my spine, and I closed my eyes, inhaling the lavender still clinging to my hoodie from the letter. I sat, staring at the locket on the table. I ran my thumb over the initials, feeling the groove of each letter, the roughness where I'd scratched too hard, too young to know any better. I got up to make tea, needing something to do with my hands. As the kettle hissed, I caught a flash of color outside, the mail truck, pulling away. I peered out the window and spotted another envelope, half hidden in the hedge. Weird. I stepped outside, feet crunching on the gravel path. The envelope was addressed to my neighbor, but what caught my eye was the sticker on the back, a lavender sprig, almost identical to the ones Mia and I used to press in our diaries. My heart thudded. Another coincidence? I took it inside, adding it to the growing pile of strange signs. The kettle screamed, and I poured the tea, hands shaking. I sat back down at the table, locket in one hand, mug in the other, and tried to sort out what I was feeling. Fear, mostly, of being hurt again, of reaching out only to be rejected. I thought about the party last year, the empty chair, the texts I never sent. What if the letter was right? What if I was about to make another mistake, one I couldn't fix? I looked at the clock. 3:18 p.m. If I was going to reach out, it had to be now. I picked up my phone and dialed her old number before I could think twice. It rang, once, twice, 3 times. My stomach twisted. Then, hello? Mia's voice, uncertain, older but unmistakable. I froze. My throat closed up. The locket felt like it was burning in my palm. Hey, I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. There was a pause. Is that you? She said, her voice soft, cautious, like she wasn't sure if she wanted the answer. I hesitated, heart thudding. Yeah. It's me. The silence stretched, taut as a wire. I didn't think I'd hear from you, she said finally. There was something in her tone, relief, maybe, or regret. I got something weird today, I said, forcing myself to keep going. A package. With the locket. The line was quiet. I could hear her breathing, a faint crackle. The locket, she echoed, like she couldn't believe it. Yeah. And a letter. It said, I faltered, suddenly unsure how much to reveal. It said I should talk to you. Today. She laughed, shaky and surprised. That's kind of spooky. I was just thinking about you. I almost messaged, but, she trailed off. But what? I asked, my pulse roaring in my ears. I didn't know if you wanted to hear from me. After last year. I swallowed hard. I wanted to. I just didn't know how. The kettle clicked off behind me, the sudden silence pressing in. The lavender scent seemed to swell, filling the kitchen. Can we meet? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. I closed my eyes, feeling the locket's weight, the letter's warning echoing in my mind. Yeah, I said. Let's. And as I hung up, I realized, for the first time all day, I was actually scared, but also, hopeful. But I still didn't know what the letter meant about before it's too late. And as I got ready to leave, I wondered, what if I was already too late? My thumb hovered over Mia's contact for at least a full minute. The locket sat heavy in my palm, its cold metal pressing into my skin, like it was waiting for me to finally do something. And then, before I could talk myself out of it, I hit call. Each ring seemed to echo with everything unsaid between us until, on the 4th ring, she answered. Hello? Her voice was small. Cautious, like she'd been expecting a wrong number. Hey. Mia, it's me. I got your old number from our group chat. My own voice cracked in a way I hated. Do you have a minute? There was a pause, and I could hear her breathing softly on the other end, like she was weighing whether to hang up. Yeah. I've got time. I took a shaky breath. I know it's been a while. But something happened, and I just needed to talk to you. About last year. She was silent for a long moment. I could hear the faint hum of a ceiling fan in her background. I thought you'd never call, she said, barely above a whisper. Before I lost my nerve, I blurted it out. Why didn't you come to my birthday? I waited for you. I thought maybe you just didn't care. There was a sound, like she was setting down a mug. I did care. I wanted to be there more than anything. But that morning, I got a call from my dad's caretaker. He'd had a stroke. I spent the whole night at the hospital. Her voice broke. I didn't know how to tell you. It felt like my world was falling apart and I just shut down. All the anger I'd been holding on to started to unravel. Mia, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I should have called, she said. But every day that passed, it just got harder. I thought you hated me. I squeezed the locket, the edges digging into my palm. I missed you. Even after everything. I got something today, a package, actually. From my future self, apparently. I tried to laugh, but it came out wobbly. It made me realize how stupid I'd been. And that maybe it's not too late. She actually laughed then, a nervous, watery sound. From the future, huh? What did you send yourself? Lottery numbers? Not exactly, I said. A locket. The one you gave me in middle school. And a letter that kind of saw right through me. I hesitated. Do you want to meet? For a second, I thought she might refuse. But then, yeah. I really do. We picked a cafe halfway between our apartments. The next afternoon, I walked in and spotted her immediately, tucked in a corner booth with her old denim jacket and that familiar nervous smile. As I slid into the seat, she bit her lip. I brought you something, she said, and slid a small wrapped box across the table. I stared. We're doing this again? She grinned, just a little. I never got to give you your real birthday present. I handed her the locket, watching her eyes widen. I think this belongs to both of us, I said. She opened her box. Inside was a tiny photo album, filled with pictures of us through the years. The last page was blank. For new memories, she whispered. I pressed the locket into her palm. I think my future self wanted me to remember what matters. Not regrets, just the people who stick with you, even when it's messy. We sat there for a long time, just talking, laughing, apologizing for all the ways we'd both been scared. When I finally stood to leave, the locket felt warm for the first time in years. Walking home, I thought about the package. Maybe it really had come from the future, or maybe it was just the universe's way of nudging me toward the conversation I'd been avoiding. Either way, I realized forgiveness isn't about erasing the past. It's about opening yourself up to the chance that things can be different. And that sometimes, the strangest gifts come at exactly the right moment, not to change your fate, but to give you the courage to try.
I never thought my little sister could outsmart 5 grown adults, but last year, our family sat her down for a surprise intervention, because we were convinced she was hiding something huge. At the time, we thought we were doing the right thing. Now, after Emma's bombshell revelation, I realize how completely wrong we were. The story of that night still gets told at every family gathering, but I'm not sure anyone really gets just how cleverly Emma played us all. Stick around, because by the end, you'll see why my parents, my brother, and I will never underestimate Emma again. So, let me set the scene. In our house, Emma's always been the baby. She's the youngest by a good 7 years, and for as long as I can remember, that meant she was either being doted on or completely ignored. Growing up, she was the one who needed help tying her shoes, who got away with stuff no one else could, who could make Dad break into a smile just by pouting. But she was also the little one, the kid no one took seriously, even as she got older. Our family is tight but loud, the kind where everyone thinks they know best. Mom's the worrier, Dad's a fixer, and then there's me, stuck somewhere between older sibling and accidental therapist. Add my older brother Josh, sarcastic, thinks he's hilarious, and you've got a house that's never quiet for long. Emma, though, she's always been quieter, but don't mistake that for weakness. I should have realized that sooner. It started subtly, but even looking back, I can't pinpoint the exact moment things began to feel off with Emma. She was 16 and usually glued to her phone like any other teenager, but this was different. She started locking her bedroom door, which was new, she'd never cared before. I'd pass by her room and hear her whispering on the phone, voice low and urgent, pausing mid-sentence if she heard footsteps. At dinner, she'd show up late or not at all, mumbling something about homework, grabbing food, disappearing upstairs before anyone could ask questions. Mom noticed first. Has Emma seemed off to you? She'd asked me one night, worry lines deep on her forehead. Dad shrugged it off, but I could tell he was watching Emma closer, especially after she missed Sunday dinner for the 3rd week in a row. Josh joked that she was probably plotting to dye her hair blue or join a cult. We all laughed, but I caught Mom glancing at Emma's door with real concern. The tension started to build. Every locked door, every missed family movie night, seemed to confirm our fears. Was she in trouble? Was she hiding something? One afternoon, Mom cornered me in the kitchen. We need to do something. She's slipping away from us. Dad, usually content to let us figure things out, finally agreed. She's acting like she doesn't trust us. Even Josh stopped joking, which was when I knew it was serious. So, we decided to confront her, together. Not an ambush, exactly, more like an intervention. The word itself made my stomach twist, but we all convinced ourselves it was what good families do. Mom wanted to write letters. Josh said that was way too dramatic. Dad wanted just an honest talk. We settled on calling Emma downstairs one evening, no warning, and hashing things out as a family. The day of the intervention, I remember the air in the house felt dense, like a storm was brewing. I kept checking my phone, watching the minutes crawl by. Mom paced the hallway. Dad sat on the couch folding and unfolding his hands. Josh was uncharacteristically quiet, tapping at his phone, avoiding eye contact. I kept replaying every weird moment with Emma over the past month. What if we were about to catch her in some kind of real trouble? Drugs? A boyfriend she knew we wouldn't approve of? Maybe she was being bullied and too embarrassed to ask for help. The possibilities kept spiraling. Finally, Emma came home. I could hear the front door creak, her footsteps up the stairs. Dad called out, his voice too cheerful. Emma, come down here for a minute, okay? She poked her head in, hair mussed, one eyebrow raised. What's up? she asked, her tone wary but not scared. We just want to talk, Mom said, trying to sound casual. We all sat in the living room, Dad in his faded armchair, Josh on the floor, Mom and I sharing the couch, Emma standing in the doorway like she was ready to bolt. The silence was awkward. I could hear the faint hum of the fridge in the kitchen, the distant rumble of a neighbor's lawnmower. Outside, the last bits of sunlight were slipping through the blinds, painting stripes across the carpet. No one seemed to know how to start. Finally, Dad cleared his throat. We're worried about you, Em. Emma looked at each of us, her face totally blank. Why? Josh tried to lighten the mood. You've been acting like a secret agent. Locked doors, mysterious phone calls, skipping dinner. Spill. Emma stared at him, then shrugged. I'm fine. Really. Mom's voice trembled. Honey, you don't have to pretend. We're your family. If something's wrong, if you're in trouble, we want to help. Emma sat down on the edge of the coffee table. She didn't fidget. She didn't protest. She just looked thoughtful. So, this is like an intervention or something? I felt my cheeks flush. We care about you. You've been acting different. She nodded slowly, picking at her sleeve. Okay, well, what do you want to know? I glanced at Josh, then Mom. This was not how I imagined she'd react. No tears, no outrage. She was calm, almost amused. I realized my hands were sweating, gripping a throw pillow so hard my knuckles ached. Dad leaned forward. We just want the truth, Emma, whatever it is. She smiled, tiny, controlled. You want the truth, she repeated. Her eyes flicked from one of us to the next. I couldn't read her at all. It felt like the living room shrank around us. No one spoke. The clock on the mantel clicked so loudly it might as well have been a countdown. And then Emma said, okay, but I think you might be surprised. Something about the way she said it sent shivers up my spine. I had no idea what was about to happen, but for the first time, I wondered if maybe, just maybe, we were the ones about to get blindsided. Emma sat on the edge of the floral love seat, her legs swinging just above the rug as our whole family faced her. The air in our living room was heavy with a mix of anxious energy and embarrassment. No one wanted to speak first, but everyone was thinking the same thing. What is Emma hiding? Mom finally broke the silence, her voice gentle but strained. Emma, sweetheart, we just want to know if you're okay. If there's anything you want to talk about, we're here. Emma didn't shrink or fidget. She looked right at Mom, then at each of us in turn, Dad, our older brother Mike, and me, her expression polite, almost amused. She nodded, hands folded neatly in her lap. I appreciate it, Mom, really, she said, her voice calm, not a trace of panic. The only sound was the soft tick of the grandfather clock by the window and the faint hum of the dishwasher running in the kitchen. It was unsettling. I expected tears, protests, anger, anything but this serene composure. Mike tried to soften the moment, running a hand through his hair. We're not mad, okay? We just noticed you've been acting kinda different. She tilted her head, feigning curiosity. Different how? She asked. Her eyes glinted, but not in a way I could pin down. Was she playing dumb? Or did she really not know? Dad coughed, clearing his throat. He shifted in his recliner, papers rustling on his lap. We've seen you up late, using the printer, and, you seemed pretty upset when your notebook went missing. He glanced at me, as if hoping I'd jump in to back him up. Emma just nodded again, her lips pursed in thought. I've had some projects for school. I needed to print a lot. And I was frustrated about the notebook because it had some ideas I didn't want to lose. She spoke in that same infuriatingly even tone, never confirming or denying, giving us just enough to keep us guessing. Mom pressed her, voice trembling. Emma, is there anything you want to tell us? Anything at all? A soft, almost imperceptible smile played at the corner of Emma's mouth. No, not really, but I appreciate you all worrying about me. The words were so polite, so deliberately neutral, that they only deepened our unease. My palms felt clammy against my jeans. Mike started bouncing his knee, sending vibrations through the couch. Dad sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. Well, if you ever do want to talk about something, anything, we're here. Emma's gaze flicked to him, eyes almost twinkling, and she nodded in agreement. She was handling this whole thing better than any of us. As the conversation dragged on, I noticed a tremor in Mom's hand as she pushed a stray hair behind her ear. The tension in the room swirled like a fog, thick and suffocating, but Emma just sat in the eye of the storm, unmoved. That's when my brain started rewinding, going back over the last week, trying to make sense of the clues that brought us here. Most of them pointed to something big, but when I really looked at them, none fit together quite right. The first weird thing happened late one Tuesday evening. I couldn't sleep and was wandering to the kitchen for a glass of water when I saw blue light flickering under Emma's door. The faint whir of the printer echoed down the hall, punctuated by the plastic clatter of printed pages landing in the output tray. She was up way past midnight, and when I knocked, she called out, "Just a sec." Her voice sounded too chipper for the hour. I let it go, figuring it was homework. The next morning, I spotted her spiral notebook, the bright yellow one with the sticker of a winking cat, missing from her backpack. She used to clutch that thing like a diary, always scribbling or doodling in it. I asked her about it over breakfast, the smell of toast and coffee filling the kitchen. "Oh, it's probably in my room somewhere," she said, not looking up from her cereal. But in the days that followed, she seemed restless, peeking into corners and closets, eyes scanning for something. Then there was the old family computer, the beige brick we'd barely touched in years, tucked away in the den behind a stack of board games. I caught Emma using it one afternoon, fingers flying over the dusty keyboard. The soft click-clack echoed in the quiet room. "Why aren't you using your laptop?" I asked. She shrugged. "School stuff. Needed this for, compatibility." She closed the browser window just a bit too fast as I walked up. All week, these details stacked up in my mind, refusing to fit together. Printing late at night, missing notebook, resurrected computer. Either she was working on a secret project, or she was hiding something more alarming. I tried to shake the images from my mind, but they lingered, persistent and unresolved. The smell of Dad's cologne mixed with the faint lemon from the furniture polish as I watched him stand up from his chair, frustration etched on his face. "Emma, I'm sorry, but I have to check your backpack," he said, voice tight but not unkind. Emma didn't flinch, in fact, she didn't even protest. "Go ahead," she replied, pushing her backpack across the coffee table with practiced nonchalance. If she was worried, she hid it well. Dad unzipped each pocket slowly, the nylon fabric rasping under his hands. He pulled out textbooks, an empty water bottle, some loose pens, nothing unusual. Then, from the bottom compartment, he lifted out a plastic folder, the kind you'd buy in a back-to-school aisle. It was locked with a flimsy combination padlock. Mom gasped softly, one hand flying to her mouth. "Emma, what's in there?" she asked. Emma just shrugged, folding her arms. "You can open it if you want." Dad hesitated, then spun the combination dial. The tumblers clicked, and the padlock popped open. Inside, there was nothing but a single folded slip of paper. He pulled it out, the paper crinkling between his fingers. I leaned in, the scent of printer ink still lingering. Dad read aloud. "Sometimes, what you seek is just a mirror." He looked at us, puzzle written all over his face. Mike let out a groan. "What does that even mean?" Emma sat perfectly still, her lips pressed together to avoid smiling. She was enjoying this, maybe a little too much. The folder, the note, the locked compartment, it all felt like a performance, or a test we were failing. For the first time, I saw uncertainty flicker across Mom's face. Maybe we're overreacting," she whispered to Dad. "Maybe it's just a school thing." Dad didn't look so sure. "But the notebook, the computer," he started, but Emma cut in smoothly, "I promise, it's nothing dangerous." The sun was setting by the time we finished our awkward investigation, golden light casting long stripes across the living room carpet. Emma stood and stretched, then headed for the stairs, leaving the cryptic note and the empty folder behind as if she'd already forgotten about them. That night, after dinner, I lay awake in my room, the house quiet except for the occasional floorboard creaking as someone got a glass of water. I was replaying everything, Emma's calm, the empty folder, the weird note, when I heard a soft giggle from the hallway. My door was cracked open a sliver, letting in a slice of lamplight. I sat up, heart pounding. I slipped out of bed and padded quietly to Emma's door, pressing my ear against the wood. Her voice floated through, hushed and excited, punctuated by soft laughter. "Yeah, I put the empty folder in there. They totally bought it," she whispered. There was a pause, then another giggle. "No, the second folder is hidden. No way they'll find it." My blood ran cold. Who was she talking to? What was the real secret? I ducked away from the door just as her laughter faded. My mind raced, every possible scenario playing out at once. Was she in trouble, or was this all some elaborate prank? I barely slept, the image of her smirking lips stuck in my head. The next morning, I cornered her in the hallway as she fumbled with her shoelaces, the morning light catching dust motes in the air. "Emma, we need to talk," I said, my voice sharper than I meant it to be. She looked up, eyes wide but not surprised. "About what?" "Last night, I heard you. You said there's a second folder. You said we bought it. What's really going on?" My hands were trembling, but I pushed them into my pockets. Emma paused, then smiled, not her usual, impish grin, but something older, almost conspiratorial. "Okay," she whispered, glancing around to make sure we were alone. "I'll tell you part of it." She leaned closer, her voice so low I had to strain to hear. "I staged some of it. The printing, the missing notebook, the locked folder. I wanted to see what you'd do. how far you'd go to figure me out. She laughed softly, the sound warm against the morning hush. Wait, you did this on purpose? I asked, almost offended, but more impressed. Yep, she said, tying her shoe and standing up. You guys jumped to conclusions so fast. It was like a science experiment. I stared at her, feeling the floor sway beneath my feet. Is that all? Or is there still something you're not telling us? Emma just winked, slinging her backpack over one shoulder. Maybe, she teased, but you'll have to wait and see. As she headed downstairs, I realized she'd turned the whole family into players in her own private game. And whatever the real secret was, she still wasn't done surprising us. I stared at Emma, my mouth hanging open, as she cleared her throat and reached into her backpack. The tension in the living room was brittle, like we were all holding our breath. I thought she was finally going to confess to sneaking out or whatever it was we'd accused her of. But instead, she pulled out a thick folder labeled Family Dynamics, an observational study. Wait, what? I blurted, half laughing, half scared. Emma grinned. I knew you guys thought I was hiding something, so I decided to run a little experiment for psychology class. You know, see how a family responds to suspicion and secrets. She flipped open the folder, pages rustling. I took notes on everything. The way Mom kept bracing herself by the counter, how Dad's eyebrow twitch meant he was about to go full lawyer mode, even how you, Mark, kept checking your phone like you expected a dramatic reveal any second. I felt my face flush. You used this for a school project? She nodded, totally unfazed. I even made a chart for the different intervention scenarios I thought you might try. Version 1. The stern sit down. Version 2. The, we love you, no matter what, approach. You guys went for a combo. Mom pulled her reading glasses off and blinked. Emma, are you serious? You wrote this all down? Emma handed her the folder, giggling. Page 4 is the best part. That's where Mark tried to secretly record the conversation, but his phone was upside down the whole time. She gave me a sly side eye. The room exploded in laughter. I groaned, sinking into the couch. I can't believe you noticed that. She shrugged. You're not as sneaky as you think, big bro. And Dad's interrogation was classic. Did you know you always tap your pen 3 times before you ask a tough question? She mimicked his stern voice perfectly. Emma, is there something you'd like to tell us? Dad tried to protest but cracked up, his laugh booming off the walls. Emma's findings were both brutal and hilarious. Apparently, Mom's go-to move was over-offering snacks as a distraction. She'd tallied 5 different types of cookies within 10 minutes. And when our cousin Ava jumped in on FaceTime to offer support, Emma had written, Ava's advice, pretend to cry, they'll fold faster. Everyone took turns reading pieces of the project, and soon we were all clutching our sides. The tension from that day had vanished, replaced by this warmth and awe for Emma's cleverness. Even the dog, Murphy, who'd been hovering for dropped food, seemed impressed by the commotion. Dad finally wiped his eyes, still chuckling. So let me get this straight. You orchestrated the most stressful afternoon of our year for a homework assignment? Emma grinned wider, and it got an A-. Mrs. Ramirez said it was the most thorough and entertaining case study she'd ever read. Mom shook her head, laughing. All this time I thought you were hiding something serious. Turns out, you were just hiding how much smarter you are than the rest of us. For a moment, we all just looked at her, the youngest in the family, always a little quiet, always watching. I realized then I'd underestimated her more than anyone. She hadn't just fooled us, she'd observed us, documented us, and then managed to bring us closer together through the reveal. Emma leaned back, sipping her tea, looking every bit the evil genius. Next time, maybe don't assume the worst, okay? Or at least try to be sneakier about it. I smiled, holding up my hands. Message received. Never doubt the little sister again. Dad nodded, mock serious. From now on, all family meetings must be Emma approved. She's clearly the mastermind. Mom laughed, hugging Emma, and Murphy finally got a cookie for his patience. Our cousin Ava texted, I'm officially scared of Emma now, with like 6 laughing emojis. That night, as we cleaned up, I kept thinking about how easy it is to see only what you expect in someone. How quickly you can build a whole story that might be completely wrong. Emma taught us to look closer, to trust a little more, and to never, ever try to outsmart her. Because, honestly, after that day, none of us would ever stand a chance. 2 years ago, my older sister, Lily, made me promise never to touch the small, padlocked metal box she kept hidden in the back of her closet. She sat me down on her bed, legs crossed, her face deadly serious. I was 13 and still convinced older sisters had access to some private, mystical adult knowledge. Her eyes, green, intense, locked onto mine. Swear, Tessa, you can't ever open it. Not even if I'm gone. You never saw it, okay? I nodded, confused but obedient, and she pressed my hand hard. The metal box was nothing special, scuffed, navy blue, the sort of thing you'd keep spare change or old jewelry in. But to Lily, it was sacred. Tonight, things got weird. Tonight, during family game night, Mom found that same box hidden inside the Monopoly box, and the key was taped to the underside. I didn't see it until Mom opened the lid and tipped out the little plastic houses, and there it was, wedged between Boardwalk and a stack of community chest cards. My stomach twisted. Why would Lily risk hiding her most secret possession out in the open, and what's inside it that she was so desperate to keep hidden? By the end of tonight, not only would I know the truth, but our family would never look at each other the same way again. Let me back up and paint the picture. There's the three of us, me, Tessa, 16, perpetually stuck between wanting to disappear and wanting to be seen. Lily, 18, brilliant, moody, a little reckless, a lot secretive. And Mom, who's been doing her best since Dad moved out 3 years ago, though sometimes her best is a little too much. We live in a lopsided blue house in the suburbs, where the air still smells faintly of last week's rain, and the front porch creaks like a warning. Our family game nights are a tradition Mom started after Dad left. If we're going to fall apart, we'll do it with some dignity and snacks, she would joke, cracking open a bag of off-brand chips. Most Fridays, it's Monopoly, because that's the only game everyone agrees on. The board is faded and warped, Bill's missing, one of the thimbles chewed on by the dog years ago. But it's ours. Tonight, the air in the living room felt heavy, like a storm was coming. Mom was in overdrive, lining up snacks in neat rows, popcorn, pretzels, that weird cheese in a can, while humming nervously under her breath. "Girls, come on, let's get started before someone bails," she called, her voice a little too bright. Lily slouched into the room, hoodie sleeves pulled down over her hands, earbuds dangling around her neck. She looked tired. No, she looked worried, like she'd just remembered something important and was trying to forget it again. I trailed in, clutching my water bottle, wishing I could blend into the couch. As Mom set up the board, Lily hovered nearby, eyeing the Monopoly box. Her hand twitched when Mom lifted the lid, but Mom didn't notice. She was too busy sorting out money piles, chirping, "Banker? Who's banker tonight?" "I'll do it," Lily said quickly, voice thin as paper. Mom raised an eyebrow. "Really? You hate being the banker?" Lily shrugged, not meeting her eyes. "Changed my mind." I watched her, a prickly unease running up my arms. The last time Lily volunteered for anything, it was because she needed an excuse to leave the room and cry in the bathroom. Something was off. We settled into our usual spots, Mom cross-legged on the floor, Lily leaning against the armchair, me wedged between them. The TV was off for once, and all you could hear was the soft crunch of snacks and the distant sound of a neighbor's dog barking. I could smell the tangy, fake cheese, and something else, sweat, maybe, or the sharp, metallic whiff of nerves. "Okay," Mom said, clapping her hands. "House rules. No flipping the board, and no IOUs." She was trying too hard, I thought. She always did that when things felt fragile. Lily stared at the game pieces, then at the box. Her foot tapped against the hardwood. Mom shot her a look, a mix of worry and something else. I saw it, a flicker, like they shared some secret neither was saying out loud. It wasn't just tonight. There'd been little hints over the past few months. I'd catch Lily and Mom in the kitchen, their voices dropping to whispers when I walked in. Or Lily would storm out after dinner, Mom staring after her, jaw tense, hands shaking just a little. Something was brewing, and I was always on the outside. "Earth to Tessa," Lily said, snapping her fingers in front of my face. I blinked. "Sorry." Zoning out. Mom smiled, but her eyes darted between us. "Let's just play, okay? Everyone pick your token." I grabbed the battered shoe, Lily the car, Mom the dog. Lily shot me a look, one of those silent, "don't you dare say anything" looks. She'd been doing that a lot lately, as if she thought I might spill something I didn't even know. The game started. Dice clacked, pieces shuffled. Mom kept trying to make jokes. "Watch out, Lily, I'm buying up all the railroads," but her laughter sounded brittle. Lily moved her pieces with quick, jerky motions, barely looking at the board. Whenever Mom reached for the Monopoly box, Lily's shoulders tensed. I could see her eyes flick to the corner where the lid met the cardboard. Her breath seemed shallower, like she was bracing for something. "Lily, you okay?" I whispered, nudging her knee under the table. She shot me a warning glare. "I'm fine." But she wasn't. Her hands were shaking so hard she dropped the dice. They rolled under the couch, and she dove after them like her life depended on it, hair swinging over her face. Mom watched her with tight lips. I bit down on my thumbnail, heart pounding for reasons I couldn't quite name. The whole room felt like a balloon stretched too tight, ready to pop. Mom tried to break the tension with a forced laugh. "Girls, can we please try to act like we're having fun?" Maybe we could play something else, I offered, desperate to shift the mood. Lily didn't look up. No, Monopoly's fine, Mom sighed, rubbing her temples. Let's just keep going. We played on, but the air got heavier. Every time Lily had to reach for the box, for more money, a property card, her hand hovered, hesitant. I could hear the faint clink of the padlock inside the box, muffled by cardboard and game pieces. It was like the secret was humming in the room, just out of sight. I remembered the promise from 2 years ago, that moment on her bed, the way her voice shook. Don't open it, don't ask. But now the box was right there, weeks after I'd last seen it buried under her winter sweaters. Why? What changed? Mom leaned over to draw a chance card, and that's when she saw it, the edge of metal peeking from under the pile. She froze. The silence was sharp, like the room had been plunged underwater. Is this? She trailed off, pulling out the box with trembling hands. The padlock gleamed in the lamplight, and the key was taped neatly to the bottom of the Monopoly lid. Lily's face went white. I stared at Lily, waiting for her to say something, to do anything. For a second, no one breathed. Mom held up the box, voice barely above a whisper. Lily, why is this here? My heart thudded against my ribs. Lily's eyes darted to the door, then back to the box, panic written all over her face. And in that stretched, silent moment, I knew. Whatever was in that box, it wasn't just Lily's secret anymore. What I didn't know was how much it would cost all of us to open it. We're halfway through Monopoly and things are getting heated, mostly because Dad has 3 hotels on Boardwalk and is gloating as only a dad can. I'm counting my dwindling cash, Lily's chewing on her thumbnail, and Mom's just landed in jail for the 3rd time, which she claims is statistically impossible. The room smells like pizza, and the rain tapping the windows makes everything feel a bit cozier than usual. It's like any other game night, but there's an undercurrent of something I can't put my finger on, especially with Lily so tense. It happens so fast I almost don't process it. Mom's reaching for the dice and accidentally elbows the Monopoly box hard enough that it teeters off the edge of the table. There's the unmistakable clatter of plastic houses and hotels, play money floating to the floor like confetti. But then there's a heavier thunk, the sound of metal on wood. Everyone freezes. I lean forward, and there it is. Lily's silver metal box, dented on one corner, lying half exposed among the scattered game pieces. For a second, no one moves. My heart makes this weird, lurching leap, like it knows something big is about to happen. Dad frowns, Mom leans over, and Lily, oh God, Lily's gone ghost pale. She looks like she might bolt from the room. What's this? Mom asks, reaching for the box even as Lily's lips part in a silent protest. Nothing, Lily blurts, her voice shrill and too quick. She grabs for it, but Mom's faster. Then Mom notices the key, tiny, old-fashioned, and taped right to the bottom of the Monopoly box. She peels it off, turning it over in her hands, studying Lily with confusion and a trace of worry. Mom's eyebrows go up. Lily, is this yours? Her tone is casual, but there's an edge. Maybe she thinks it's just a diary or something harmless, she has no idea. Lily folds her arms, chin jutting stubbornly. It's private, okay? Can we just put it away and finish the game? The tension in the room is suddenly electric. The sound of the rain seems louder, and I realize I'm holding my breath. Dad glances between them, unsure who to side with. I feel this knot in my stomach, because I promised Lily I'd never touch that box. But I also want to know. I can't help myself. I look at Lily, and her eyes meet mine for half a second, wide, pleading. She shakes her head ever so slightly, like she's begging me to just let this go. But the Pandora's box is open, and Mom's curiosity is piqued. Mom sets the box on the table and fits the key into the padlock, but she doesn't turn it yet. If this is something you shouldn't have, Lily, she says, quieter now, I need to know. Lily's hands are shaking. It's not. It's nothing bad. Just, please, Mom. Don't open it. There's a moment where the only sound is the rain and the little metallic click as Mom fidgets with the lock, not opening it but not letting go either. I'm suddenly hyper-aware of everything in the room. The warm pizza box, the uneven flicker of the overhead light, the faint smell of vanilla from the candle Mom lit earlier. But all of that feels distant. All I can focus on is Lily's face, tight with panic and something else, maybe fear. Dad finally interjects, tentative. Maybe we should respect her privacy, honey. But Mom's not having it. Not if it's something dangerous, or if she's in trouble. Then, to Lily. Have you done something you shouldn't have? Her voice is gentle, but pressed through gritted teeth. Lily presses her lips together. No, just, please trust me. I feel like I'm at the center of a tug of war. Part of me wants to speak up for Lily, to tell Mom she's overreacting. The other part wants to know what could possibly be so important that Lily would hide it in plain sight, behind padlocks and secret keys, in the middle of a family board game. Don't you remember, Lily says, turning to me, voice trembling, tears welling in her eyes, how you promised. Please, help me. My mouth goes dry. I nod, almost imperceptibly, but Mom's not even looking at me. She's staring Lily down, weighing whether to cross that invisible parental line. It's like the air is pressurized. Nobody moves. The Monopoly pieces are scattered, forgotten, the pizza is going cold, and all of us are caught in this strange standoff. I can see Lily's chest rising and falling, way too fast, her hands clutching the table's edge so hard her knuckles are white. Mom sighs, frustration leaking out. Lily, if you just told me what was in it, I wouldn't have to open it. Lily's voice is a whisper. I can't. My mind starts racing. I remember flashes from the past 2 years, Lily's odd behavior. The late nights when I'd hear the garage door creak open and close, the way she'd disappear into her room with her phone clutched tight, only emerging when she thought no one was watching. There were times she'd get strange texts and vanish mid-conversation, or answer calls in the backyard, her silhouette hunched and tense through the kitchen window. Once, I found her crying on the back steps, phone in hand, but she brushed me off. Just a fight with a friend, she'd said, rubbing her eyes. I'd believed her, at least, I wanted to. Another time, I caught her shoving the metal box deeper into her closet when she thought I wasn't looking. I told myself everyone has secrets. Now, sitting here, I can't ignore it anymore. Lily's staring at me, eyes pleading. Please, I swear it's not what you think, just don't let her open it. Mom's jaw clenches. I'm your mother, Lily. If something is wrong, you have to tell me. Dad looks helpless, glancing at me, then at Lily. Maybe we should wait, talk about it first? His voice is the peacemaker's, but I can tell he's sweating. Lily shakes her head. No, please, just give it back. A crack of thunder rattles the windows. I flinch. The world outside feels miles away, like our house is the only place that exists. Just the 4 of us, this box, and all the secrets swirling around it. Mom's voice is steel. I'm opening it. No, Lily cries, lunging across the table, but Mom's quicker. She fits the key into the lock and twists. There's a sharp metallic snap as the padlock clicks open, echoing in the silent room. Lily crumples. Her head drops into her hands, shoulders shaking with sobs that seem to come from somewhere deep, painful, wretched. I'm sorry, she chokes out. I never meant for it to get this far. Mom hesitates, the open box resting in her lap. She's silent for a moment, looking between Lily and Dad, not sure what to expect. I realize my own hands are shaking. What do you mean, this far? Dad asks, voice barely above a whisper. Lily draws in a ragged breath. It was just a lie at first, a stupid lie. But then it got bigger, and I couldn't stop. I didn't know how to fix it. I lean closer, pulse pounding in my ears. I want to reach out, take her hand, but I don't know if she'd let me. Mom lifts the lid. Inside the box is a swirl of color, envelopes, scraps of paper, some kind of old photograph, a folded letter, and something small and glittering. My breath catches in my throat. Lily's still sobbing. I'm sorry, she repeats. I didn't want anyone to know. I didn't want you to hate me. Dad's voice is almost gentle. Lily, sweetheart, what did you do? But before she can answer, Mom picks up the first item, a thick, crumpled envelope with Lily's name written in shaky handwriting. She pulls out a faded photo, holds it up to the light. I can see Lily as a little kid, beaming, arms slung around a girl I don't recognize. There are more letters, some addressed to Lily, one to Mom and Dad, sealed and unopened. And then, at the very bottom, a silver charm bracelet catches the overhead light, sparkling like a secret just waiting to spill out. Lily? Mom's voice is trembling now. Who are these from? Lily looks up, eyes red and rimmed with tears. She looks at each of us, her whole body trembling, like she's about to break apart. And just before she can answer, the sound of Dad's phone buzzing against the table cuts through the moment, reminding us the world outside still exists. But inside the room, every answer, every explanation, is suspended, right on the edge, waiting for what Lily will say next. A hush fell over the living room as Mom held up the key between her fingers, her face a strange mix of confusion and dread. Lily stood rooted to the floor, arms crossed tightly over her chest, her eyes trained on the padlocked box like it might spring open and spill secrets everywhere. The Monopoly board was forgotten, game pieces scattered like casualties on the carpet. I could barely breathe as Mom slid the key into the lock. The click echoed way too loudly in the silence. When the lid creaked open, the first thing I saw was a stack of letters, yellowed and soft at the edges. Beneath them sat a faded black and white photo of a young man with familiar eyes, Dad, but younger, maybe our age. Next to it was a crumpled envelope, stuffed with bills, the kind that look like they've been counted and recounted in nervous hands. Mom gasped. Lily, what is this? Lily finally moved, stepping forward like she'd been holding herself back for years. You want to know? She said, voice shaking but louder than I'd ever heard it. These are Dad's letters. From after he left. I reached out, fingertips brushing the paper, feeling the roughness. But, he never wrote to us. Did he? Lily shook her head. He did. Dozens of times. I found them by accident in Mom's closet 2 years ago. He sent money, too. Birthdays, holidays, just because. Her voice broke, and her hands shook as she pulled out one of the letters. He wanted to come back. He wanted us to know he loved us. But Mom, she never told us. I looked at Mom. Her mouth was open, but no sound came out. Her face went from pale to flushed pink, and she pressed a fist to her lips. Why? Lily demanded. Why would you do that? Why would you let us believe he abandoned us? The clock ticked so loudly it was like thunder in the quiet. Finally, Mom set the box down and sat on the coffee table, her shoulders hunched. Because I was scared, she said, voice so small I barely heard it. He hurt me, Lily. Not in ways people could see, but he did. I couldn't let him come back. I didn't want you two getting your hopes up, or loving someone who could hurt you, too. She covered her face and started to cry, sharp little sobs that made my chest ache. Lily balled her fists. You should have told us the truth. You shouldn't have taken away our choice. I didn't know where to look. My hands felt cold, and I could barely think straight. Part of me wanted to run to Lily, to stand with her in her anger, but another part wanted to go to Mom, who suddenly looked so small and alone. I was caught in this impossible space between them. Lily, please, Mom said, wiping her cheeks. I thought I was protecting you. From what? Our own father? Lily's voice cracked. Mom nodded miserably. From disappointment. From the cycle. I thought if we started fresh, you'd have a chance at something better. I stared at the letters, at Dad's careful handwriting, the loops and slants that matched Lily's when she was nervous. Did he ever try to see us? I asked. Mom nodded again. He called once. I hung up. I was so angry, so scared. I didn't want him to confuse you. 5 minutes had crawled by since we opened the box, but it felt like a lifetime. I could feel something building inside me, not quite grief, not quite relief. Maybe it was the start of forgiveness, though I didn't know for whom. So what now? I asked, voice barely above a whisper. Lily looked at me, her eyes rimmed with red. I don't know, but I'm tired of secrets. Mom reached for Lily's hand, tentative, as if expecting to be brushed away. Lily hesitated, and then let her, just for a second. The touch was clumsy, trembling, but it was enough. We can read the letters, Lily said softly. All of us. Together. If you want. Mom nodded, her tears still fresh but her voice steady. I want. A weight seemed to lift, just a little, from the room. The air shifted, from suffocating to something almost breathable. I sat down, feeling the rough carpet under my palms, and watched as Lily unfolded the first letter. Her voice was thick, but she started to read. Dear Lily and Mia, she began, and the words hung in the air like a fragile bridge. We listened. We cried. We argued some more, but it felt different this time, like the hurt was a wound we could finally see, and maybe even heal. For the first time in years, we were honest. Messy, hurting, but honest. And as the night faded into early morning, Monopoly pieces still scattered around us, I realized that the secret in Lily's locked box wasn't the end of our family. It was the beginning of something new, something built on truth, no matter how painful. Maybe that was what we really needed all along. 2 years ago, I thought I was just getting a roommate, someone to split the rent, maybe binge watch some Netflix with, and hopefully not leave dishes in the sink. Jamie answered my ad one muggy August morning. She was early, clutching a battered duffel and wearing a smile that seemed both hopeful and a little nervous. I showed her around our creaky old apartment, warped hardwood, the scent of coffee lingering from a cafe downstairs, and that endless city hum filtering through perpetually cracked windows. I pointed out the 2 bedrooms, one large and airy, the other barely bigger than a generous closet. To my surprise, Jamie barely glanced at the spacious room. She pointed to the tiny one, her eyes flicking to a window covered by faded blue curtains and a battered desk wedged beneath it. This one's perfect, she said, voice soft but steady. I like small spaces. I laughed, assuming she was kidding, but she was already dragging her duffel inside, shoes squeaking on the scuffed floor. I remember thinking, maybe she's the minimalist type. We ordered pizza that night, and she told me about her favorite authors while we ate cross-legged on the living room rug. She laughed easily, didn't seem shy at all, and by the end of the night, it felt like we'd known each other for ages. For the first few weeks, everything felt normal. Jamie was neat, almost obsessively so. She never left a mess in the kitchen, and she always made her bed, even if she was just working at her desk all day. That desk became her little command center. Old wood, brass handles, carved with initials from previous tenants. I only noticed the bottom right drawer because Jamie always made sure it was locked before she left the apartment. At first, I thought nothing of it. We all have stuff we'd rather keep private, a diary, maybe some embarrassing memorabilia. But one day, I came home early from work and saw Jamie hurriedly stuffing something inside that drawer. She caught me looking and smiled, but her fingers fumbled with the tiny padlock. "Just some personal papers," she said, a little too quickly, as she clicked the lock shut. "Nothing exciting, trust me." I nodded, but the drawer's presence became hard to ignore. Even in that cramped room, with nowhere to hide, she treated that one desk drawer like it was a vault. Once, I jokingly asked if she was hiding secret love letters. She chuckled, the sound tight, eyes darting away. "I wish," Jamie said, "but it's honestly just boring stuff. Legal things." She changed the subject, and I let it drop. Still, every time I helped her move furniture, or cleaned the apartment, my eyes lingered on that locked drawer. Its brass handle always glinted in the sunlight, just a little too shiny compared to the rest of the battered desk. I told myself it was none of my business, but something about the way Jamie guarded it made my curiosity simmer quietly in the background. As months slipped by, Jamie's odd little habits started stacking up. She paid her share of the rent in crisp cash every month, always sealed in a plain envelope. She never wrote a check, never sent a transfer, even after I offered to set up Venmo. "Cash just feels safer," she'd shrug, folding the envelope in half before sliding it across the kitchen counter. She avoided phone calls in the apartment, always stepping out onto the fire escape or down to the cafe below. If her phone rang when she was inside, she'd let it buzz until it stopped, even if her ringtone echoed off the walls in that tiny room. Once, when I knocked unexpectedly on her door to ask if she wanted Thai food, she startled so badly she nearly dropped her phone. I watched her face drain, then settle into a tight smile. "Sorry, you just surprised me," she said, voice flat. After that, I started noticing how she tensed up whenever someone buzzed our apartment, delivery guys, neighbors, even my friends. She'd freeze, staring at the door until the moment passed. I chalked it up to anxiety. We all have baggage, right? She was respectful, paid rent on time, and never left her stuff lying around. But my curiosity got a little sharper one evening when Mrs. Kim from down the hall cornered me beside the mailbox. She leaned in, her floral perfume swirling between us. "Your new roommate is quiet," she said, in that way neighbors do when they're actually prying. But I could swear I've seen her before. "Does she work at the hospital?" I shook my head, but my stomach pinched. Jamie had told me she worked remotely for a publishing company. Later that night, I replayed the conversation as I rinsed dishes, the city glow seeping through our kitchen window. That's when I started to wonder if Jamie's stories had more layers than she let on. I told myself I was just being nosy, but the locked drawer was starting to feel less like a harmless quirk and more like a puzzle I wasn't meant to solve. And even then, I had no idea just how much that single, locked drawer would change everything. Sometimes you don't realize your whole idea of someone is slightly off until a stranger points it out. A month before the night that changed everything, I was coming home with an armful of groceries. It was one of those spring days where the air is just warm enough to trick you into leaving your jacket behind, and the hallway smelled faintly of floor polish and the neighbor's burnt toast. As I juggled my keys, Mrs. Alvarez from 2B poked her head out, waving hello. I smiled, bracing for the usual weather chat, but instead she leaned in, voice low. "That your new roommate? Jamie, right?" she asked, nodding toward our door. "Yeah," I said. "She's been here almost 2 years now." Mrs. Alvarez's brow furrowed. "Funny, I could swear I've seen her before. Not here, though." She tapped her chin, like she was trying to summon a memory. "Maybe at the pharmacy on Oak, or..." She trailed off, waving it away. "Never mind. Faces blend together at my age." I laughed politely, but Jamie's voice came sharp from behind me. "Everything okay?" She'd appeared out of nowhere, hair still damp from a shower, eyes darting between us. Mrs. Alvarez smiled, oblivious. "Just telling your roommate you have one of those familiar faces, dear." Jamie's shoulders tightened, her fingers gripping the doorknob. "I don't go out much," she said, voice flat. "Probably just someone else." She ushered us both inside, shutting the door with a little more force than necessary. I remember the sound, the metallic click of the lock sliding home, then Jamie's footsteps scuffing against the thin carpet as she slipped into her room. At first, I brushed it off, but as I put away the groceries I replayed the scene. Jamie was always polite with neighbors, but there was something else in her eyes that afternoon. Something like panic. I found myself standing in the kitchen, staring at the cheap clock on the wall, wondering if I'd just witnessed a crack in her usually calm exterior. That night, I lay in bed, listening to the low hum of the traffic outside, and for the first time in months, I wondered, who was Jamie, really? The next few weeks, little things started piling up. Jamie had always been private, but now it felt like she was actively monitoring what I did. One night, I came home late from work, rainwater squelching in my sneakers, and found her at the kitchen table, sorting through the stack of mail. My mail. She looked up, startled, and fumbled the envelopes, nearly dropping a utility bill onto the floor. "Oh, I was just checking for my bank statement," she said quickly, cheeks flushed. "Didn't mean to snoop." I forced a smile. "No problem. Just, let me get my stuff first next time." She nodded, but her hands shook as she stuffed a stack of envelopes back together. I noticed her gaze flick to the window, then back at me, as if she was afraid someone else might be watching. The next evening, I was brushing my teeth when I heard her voice through the thin wall. Jamie's room was next to the bathroom, and the walls in our place were basically cardboard. At first, I thought she was just on the phone with her mom again, but her tone was urgent, clipped. "I told you, I can't risk that. Not now." "No, you promised. You said you'd stay away." I paused, toothbrush in hand, listening. There was a muffled reply I couldn't make out, then Jamie hissed, "If you call here again, I'll have to leave." "Don't make me do that." I stood there, toothpaste foaming in my mouth, heart thumping hard. When I finished, I tiptoed back to my room, but now my mind was racing. Who was she talking to? What exactly was she risking? And why did her voice sound more afraid than angry? The next morning, over coffee, I tried to act casual. "Late call last night?" I asked, stirring sugar into my mug. Jamie didn't look up from her cereal. "Wrong number," she said, too quickly. "Nothing important." But I noticed her hands again, always fidgeting, always restless. That day, I caught myself watching her more closely. Every time my phone buzzed with a notification, I felt a weird, prickly tension settle over the apartment. I started keeping my mail in my room. A week later, it all came to a head. It was a Friday, gray and humid. I was expecting a package, textbooks for a class 1 was thinking about taking, nothing special but not cheap either. When I got home, there was no box on the porch, and the tracking number said, "Delivered." Jamie was in the kitchen, chopping carrots, the rhythmic thud of the knife echoing through the small space. "Hey, did you see a package for me?" I asked. She stiffened, glancing over her shoulder. "No, nothing came today." I frowned. "Are you sure?" The tracker said it was dropped off this afternoon. Jamie dropped the knife. It clattered loudly against the cutting board, and she rounded on me, eyes wild. "I said there's no package. Why are you accusing me?" I blinked, taken aback by her tone. "I'm not accusing you, I just. Why do you always think I'm hiding something?" She snapped, voice rising. "I pay my share. I keep to myself. Isn't that enough for you?" My mouth opened, but no words came. She was breathing hard, hands balled into fists. The tension in the room felt like a thunderstorm about to break. "Jamie, calm down," I said gently. "I just wanted to know about the package." She glared at me for a long moment, then stormed past, slamming her bedroom door so hard that a picture frame rattled on the wall. I heard the key turn in her lock, a sharp, metallic scrape that somehow sounded final. I stood there, carrots half chopped, unsure whether I should apologize or just leave her alone. In the end, I microwaved leftovers and ate in silence, the only sounds the ticking of the clock and the faint creaks from her side of the apartment. For hours, she didn't come out. Around midnight, I knocked softly on her door. "Jamie, I'm sorry if I upset you." There was no answer. I went to bed, staring at the ceiling, my mind running wild with possibilities. Why was she so defensive? And what, if anything, did it have to do with that locked drawer she never let me near? The next evening, I ended up working late. The office was nearly empty when I left, my footsteps echoing in the lobby. Outside, the city was alive with honking cabs and the sweet, sharp smell of a food cart grilling onions. It was after 10 by the time I reached our building. The hallway was dark, only one of the overhead lights still working. I fumbled with my keys, the metal cold and slick in my hand, and pushed the door open to an apartment that felt strangely hollow. Jamie's shoes were gone. Her room was dark. That's when I noticed it. Her desk chair pushed back, the bottom drawer, usually locked tight, hanging open. My pulse quickened as I set down my bag. I approached slowly, half expecting Jamie to jump out from behind the door. But the apartment was silent, except for the soft whir of the fridge and the muted city noise drifting in through the window. I stared at the drawer. The lock was twisted sideways, as if it had been opened in a hurry. Inside, there was a neat stack of bills, 20s and 50s bundled together with a rubber band. Next to it, a plastic card with Jamie's face on it, but a name I didn't recognize, Rebecca Shaw. Beneath the card, a thick envelope addressed in looping script to Emily. My hands shook as I pulled it out, the paper soft and slightly yellowed at the edges. For a moment, I just stood there, heart pounding so loud I could barely hear the city outside. The whole apartment felt off balance, like I'd stepped onto a moving train and couldn't find my footing. I sank onto the edge of Jamie's bed, the mattress creaking under my weight, and slid my thumb under the flap of the envelope. Inside were several pages, folded and refolded so many times the creases were nearly transparent. The letter started simply, "Dearest Emily." I read on, my eyes widening with every line. It was from someone named Linda, her mother, I guessed. The words were desperate, anxious, filled with apologies and warnings. Linda wrote about a mistake, about someone who was still looking for you. She pleaded with Jamie, Emily, to stay hidden, to use the new name and never tell anyone the truth. She mentioned a scandal, something about money gone missing, authorities asking questions, and the family's name being dragged through the mud. My breath came shallow as I realized what I was reading. Jamie, no, Emily, had been living under a false identity this whole time. Every story she'd told me, every detail about her life back home, suddenly felt like it belonged to someone else. And someone was still looking for her. I sat there, the room spinning, unable to process it all at once. I glanced back at the drawer, at the stack of cash, at the name, Rebecca Shaw, staring up at me from the fake ID. Was Jamie running from the law? From her family? From something even worse? Just then, I heard footsteps in the hallway. Slow, uncertain. The doorknob rattled. I barely had time to hide the letter under a stack of notebooks before Jamie walked in. She froze when she saw me. For a split second, her face went completely blank, like a mask. Then her eyes darted to the open drawer, the envelope peeking out. "What are you doing?" she whispered, her voice trembling. I rose slowly, heart hammering. "Jamie, Emily? I found the letter. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry, but the drawer was open and..." She cut me off, voice raw. "You read it?" I nodded, swallowing hard. "Some of it. I needed to know." Jamie slumped against the wall, sliding down until she was sitting on the floor. Her hands covered her face, and for a long moment, she just shook, silent sobs racking her body. "I wasn't supposed to stay this long," she choked out finally. "I was only supposed to disappear for a few months. But then it got easier, pretending to be someone else." She looked up at me, eyes red and shining. "I'm not a criminal, not really. My family, they made stupid choices. I just paid the price." I sat down beside her, the scratchy carpet pricking my palms. "Why the locked drawer?" She laughed bitterly, wiping her eyes. "It was everything I couldn't let go of. Proof I ever existed before all this. I thought if I kept it locked, maybe it would stay in the past, you know?" I didn't know what to say. The air felt heavy and close. For the first time in 2 years, the person sitting next to me was a stranger, and also, finally, real. Outside, a siren wailed in the distance, echoing through the open window. Emily's shoulders sagged, as if she'd just set down a burden she'd been carrying alone for far too long. "I need to tell you everything," she whispered. "But you have to promise you won't hate me when I'm done." As I nodded, the truth settling between us like dust in the fading light, I had no idea what secrets were still waiting to surface. But I knew one thing. Nothing about the last 2 years would ever look the same again. Jamie sat on the threadbare rug in the middle of her tiny bedroom, hands clenched around the letter I'd found in the locked drawer. I could hear her breathing, a ragged, uneven sound that filled the silence between us. My heart hammered as I closed the door behind me. The afternoon sun slanted through her single window, carving sharp golden lines across the floor, dust motes swirling in the light. She didn't look up at first, just stared at the paper like it might disappear if she blinked too hard. Finally, she spoke, voice low and flat. "I guess you know now. You read it?" Her eyes flicked up, searching my face. I nodded. "Most of it. I didn't want to, Jamie. But it was just there, open." Jamie let out a laugh that was more of a gasp. "I was so tired last night I forgot to lock it. Figures." She traced the edge of the letter with her thumb, and I could see her hands shaking. "That's everything. My family, the mess I ran from. I spent years lying to everyone, my parents, my ex, even you." I sat down beside her, feeling the gritty texture of the rug under my palms. The letter's words echoed in my mind: fraud, warrant, the name of someone who'd been looking for her. "But why keep it here, Jamie? Why keep it at all?" She squeezed her eyes shut. "Because I needed to remember what I left behind. I needed to remind myself not to trust anyone. I thought, if I kept it close, I could control it." "Control myself." Her voice wavered. "But you made this place feel safe. I didn't mean for that to happen." A siren wailed somewhere outside, the sound distant but sharp. Jamie hugged her knees to her chest. "I really thought I could outrun it all. The money, the lies, even the people looking for me. But the truth always catches up. Doesn't it?" I swallowed. Part of me wanted to demand answers. How much was a lie? Was I in danger? But seeing her, small and scared, I just asked, "What do you want to do now?" She looked at me, tears welling in her eyes but not falling. "I want to stop running," Jamie whispered. "I'm so tired, but I don't want to drag you into it. You can pretend you never saw this. Or you can call the number on that letter." She paused, voice barely above a whisper. "Whatever you decide, I'll understand." A silence stretched between us, thick and heavy, like fog. My pulse thrummed in my ears. I thought about the trust we'd built, movie nights, late-night ramen, the time she'd sat up with me when my granddad passed. Did any of that matter, now that I knew the truth? If I protected her secret, was I complicit? If I reported her, would I ever forgive myself? The weight of the choice sat heavy in my chest, sticky and cold. Finally, I said, I don't know what I'll do yet. But I'm not going to call anyone tonight. I just need time. And maybe you do too." For the first time, Jamie let out a breath that sounded almost like relief. She nodded, wiping her cheeks with the corner of her sleeve. "Thank you. That's all I can ask." That night, the apartment felt different. The radiator clanked and hissed, dishes clinked in the sink, and every sound seemed louder. Jamie's door stayed closed. I lay awake, staring at the faint pattern of headlights moving across my ceiling, thinking about everything she'd told me, her wealthy family's business, the sudden collapse, the friend who blamed Jamie for the missing money. She'd left behind not just a scandal, but a whole identity. In the morning, the kitchen smelled like burnt toast and strong coffee. Jamie sat at the table, eyes red but determined. She pushed an envelope toward me. Inside was her share of the rent, in cash as always. "I'm leaving," she said quietly. "I'll handle things. I can't keep hiding, and I won't put you at risk." I wanted to argue, to insist she stay and fight, but I saw in her face that she'd made peace with her choice. There was nothing left but to hug her. Jamie clung to me fiercely, whispering, "Thank you for everything." After she left, the apartment felt cavernous. Her room was empty, the locked drawer gone. I kept her secret, but sometimes I wondered if I'd done the right thing. I missed the girl who made terrible puns and left notes on my door. But I understood, now, how heavy secrets can get, how they warp trust, and how hiding from your past only makes it harder to see what's in front of you. I never heard from Jamie again, but sometimes, when I pass the old desk in my room, I remember the click of that locked drawer, and the day everything changed. Maybe we're all just one secret away from a new story. 2 years ago, my older brother, Jamie, vanished into thin air. It happened after a fight at our family home, just a slammed door and then silence that stretched for days, weeks, months. By now, the police file is closed, and everyone around us acts like he was never here. But every corner of our house still holds his shadow, even if none of us ever say his name. I still live with my mom in that same weathered blue house on the edge of Willow Street. Most mornings, she shuffles quietly through her routines, pouring coffee, staring out the kitchen window, lips pressed tight. We don't talk much over breakfast anymore. If a mug clinks too loud or the toast burns, she'll flinch, and I'll pretend not to notice. The living room is heavy with old air, the kind that smells faintly of lemon cleaner and something more bitter, maybe regret. Jamie's photos are gone from the shelves, boxed and hidden in the attic, but sometimes at night I hear her climbing the stairs, floorboards creaking, and I know she's up there, touching his things. Sometimes, I catch myself listening for the sound of his laugh echoing down the hallway, for the slam of the bathroom door in the mornings. Instead, there's just the hum of the fridge and the tick of the old clock above the stove. My life's become a kind of routine, too. Work, home, tiptoe around memories. Willow Street has moved on, but I haven't. I don't think Mom has, either, no matter how much she tries to act like everything's normal. This morning started like any other. Pale sunlight through dusty blinds, the smell of burnt coffee, the quiet scrape of a chair as I sat down. I was halfway through scrolling the news on my phone when I heard a thump outside, just light enough that I almost ignored it. But then it came again, a little heavier, like something solid hitting wood. I peered through the front door's frosted glass. The porch was streaked with last night's rain, and the air smelled sharp and clean. There it was, right on the welcome mat. A battered cardboard box, corners soggy, taped up with the kind of frantic care you use when you're in a hurry. My breath caught. The address was scrawled in black marker, each letter jagged and familiar. I crouched down, heart thudding, and ran my fingers over the writing. It was Jamie's. I'd know his handwriting anywhere, his way of looping the Y in our last name, the tilt of the J that always looked like it might tip over. The return address was smudged, unreadable. But that didn't matter. For a second, I just stared, cold rain seeping through my socks, while the world felt like it had tilted sideways. "Mom," I called, voice cracking. She appeared in the hallway, wearing her old flannel robe and clutching a mug. Her eyes darted from me to the box, and I saw her shoulders tense. "What is it?" she asked, but I could already hear the edge in her voice, like she was bracing herself. I lifted the box with both hands. It was heavier than it looked, the bottom sagging a little from the damp. Something inside shifted, a dull thunk, like a book or maybe a brick. "Look," I said, turning it so she could see. "It's from Jamie, I think." She froze. The mug rattled against the saucer, and for a heartbeat, I thought she might drop it. Then she set it down, pressed her palm to her chest, and shook her head. "That's not possible," she whispered. The air between us grew thick. I could hear the wind stirring the chimes outside, each note sharp as glass. "It's his handwriting," I insisted, holding the box out like proof. "Mom, look at it." She refused. "You're mistaken. It's been too long. People move on, She stopped, swallowing hard. "It's probably a prank. Some sick joke." I felt my chest tighten, anger and hope and fear all tangled up. Who would do that? Who even remembers enough to pull something like this? She shook her head, eyes shining in the morning light. "Don't open it," she said, voice suddenly hard. "We don't know what's inside. It could be anything." I stared at her. "Don't you want to know? What if it's from him? What if it's a message?" She turned away, shoulders hunched. "Just leave it, please. For me." But I couldn't. My hands shook as I set the box down on the hallway table, every nerve buzzing. I wanted to tear it open, to finally have an answer after 2 years of silence. But at the same time, I was terrified. What if whatever was inside changed everything, again? We stood there, neither of us moving. The box sat between us, silent and heavy, the rain outside turning to a whisper against the porch roof. For a moment, it felt like all the air in the house was waiting too. I glanced at my mom, saw the fear etched into her face, and realized this package might shatter what little peace we'd managed to build. I pressed my palm to the top of the box, feeling the damp cardboard give under my fingers, and asked quietly, "What if this is the only chance we have to know what happened to Jamie?" She didn't answer. The silence stretched on, long enough that I started to wonder if I was the only one who wanted the truth. But I knew one thing. Whatever was in that box, it was going to change everything. I just didn't know if we were ready for it. My hands shook as I stood over the battered, rain-spattered package. The cardboard was soft along the corners, warped from its mysterious journey. My brother's handwriting stared up at me, unmistakable, looping, and pressed hard enough to dent the label. I ran my finger over his name, letting the rough surface prickle my skin, and felt a cold stab of hope and dread. I carried it inside, heart pounding, the air in the hallway thick and sour, like the house itself was holding its breath. At the kitchen table, I grabbed a steak knife and slid it under the taped seam. The blade rasped, the sound sharp and final. I hesitated. My mother's footsteps creaked overhead, and I thought for a second about calling her down, but something in me wanted to do this alone. I pressed the knife the rest of the way, splitting the tape with a gritty rip. Inside, layers of yellowed newspaper cradled the contents. I peeled them back, the ink flaking onto my fingertips, and pulled out a stack of old family photos. They were the kind you only see in plastic tubs in the attic, sun-faded, curling at the edges, some Polaroids, others from cheap disposable cameras. I recognized us instantly. Me, a gap-toothed kid in a space-themed sweater, my brother, grinning, lanky, arms slung around my shoulder, our parents, caught in rare moments of warmth. But tucked between the photos was a folded sheet of paper. It was thick, almost like parchment, and when I opened it, a tiny brass key clattered onto the table. The sound made me jump. I stared at the key. It was no bigger than a thumb, old-fashioned, with a filigree bow and teeth worn smooth by decades of use. I pressed it into my palm and looked at the note. The paper smelled like dust and something earthy, old basements, forgotten boxes. The handwriting was my brother's. I would have known it anywhere. I forced myself to read, even as my skin prickled with goosebumps. If you're reading this, I'm sorry. There are things you never knew. The key opens what they tried to hide. Start in the attic. Tell Mom I forgive her, even if she never tells you the truth. Don't trust everything you remember. I read it twice, then a third time, my lips moving silently. I could hear the clock ticking above the sink and, outside, a distant car rolling by, tires hissing on wet pavement. I wanted to scream, to run, to call someone, my aunt, maybe, or even the police. But all I did was sit there, clutching that little key, heart racing. I called up the stairs. "Mom, can you come down for a second?" Her reply was muffled, but I heard her footsteps on the landing. She entered, drying her hands on a dish towel, eyes tired and wary. "What's wrong?" she asked, voice tight. I showed her the package, the note, the key. I watched her face, searching for any flicker of surprise or recognition. Instead, her mouth pressed into a thin line. "Where did you get that?" she said, her voice almost a whisper. It was on the porch. It's from him. It's his handwriting. Did you know he was going to send something? She shook her head, but her eyes darted to the key. No, I didn't know. There was a beat of silence. Rain tapped against the window, soft and steady. I tried to read her. Fear, guilt, relief? I couldn't tell. He says I should start in the attic, I said. Mom closed her eyes for a moment. The attic's just full of junk. Old furniture. Nothing up there. My frustration flared. He wouldn't say it if it wasn't important. He wanted me to find something. She looked at me, jaw clenched, then turned away. I just want you to be careful, she said, almost pleading. Some things are better left alone. I ignored her and grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen drawer. The metal was cold and heavy in my hand. The house felt smaller, the air dense. I could smell the faint tang of mildew as I climbed the stairs, the carpet runner rough under my bare feet. The attic door was stiff, and I had to shoulder it open. The hinges shrieked, echoing in the cramped hallway. I flicked the light. The bulb above me was weak and yellow, barely cutting the shadows. The floorboards groaned as I stepped into the attic, ducking under a low beam. Boxes were stacked in lopsided towers, covered in dust and old flowered sheets. I swept the flashlight in slow arcs, the beam catching on cracked trunks, a deflated beanbag chair, and a broken lamp. My breath stirred motes in the cold, still air. Start in the attic, I muttered. I tried every obvious place, a jewelry box, an old dresser, even the hollow inside a rolled-up rug. Nothing. I was about to give up when I noticed a battered steamer trunk wedged behind an armoire. The brass lock was tarnished, the surface scarred. I crouched, the wood floor biting into my knees, and fit the little key into the lock. It slid in easily, like it belonged there. I hesitated, the silence pressing in, then turned the key. The lock popped open with a soft click. Inside, there was just one thing, a small, locked wooden box, dark with age. I pulled it out, hands shaking, and inspected it. The key fit here, too. I turned it, and the lid creaked open. Inside was a journal, my brother's, by the look of the handwriting on the first page. The cover was battered, the leather cracked and peeling, but the pages inside were thick and crammed with writing. Tucked into the front cover was a Polaroid, my brother, maybe 17, standing in front of the house at dusk, his face half in shadow. My fingers trembled as I flipped through the journal. At first, it was what you'd expect from a teenager, gripes about school, scribbled song lyrics, notes about friends. But as I read deeper, the entries shifted. The lines grew hurried, the pen pressed harder. There were dates, times, hastily scrawled names. One entry caught my eye. Heard them fighting again. They think I'm asleep. Mom said, he can never know. It would destroy him. Dad just kept saying, it's not your decision anymore. I don't know what they're hiding, but I can't stay here. I kept reading, the words blurring as my eyes stung. My brother had written page after page about overheard conversations late at night, about strange phone calls my parents tried to hide, about money that appeared and disappeared without explanation. Downstairs, I heard my mother calling me. Her voice was sharp, anxious. What are you doing up there? Did you find anything? I didn't answer at first, torn between anger and fear. I heard her footsteps pounding up the stairs, then the attic door creaked. She stood in the doorway, eyes flashing. What did you find? She demanded. I held up the journal. Why didn't you ever tell me about any of this? He was scared. He thought you were hiding something. What happened? She pressed her lips together, hands twisting in her sleeves. You don't understand. It's not that simple. My voice cracked. He was my brother. You let him think he was alone. She shook her head, tears shining in her eyes. We were trying to protect you. Both of you. There are things you don't know, things that happened before you were born. Your brother, he never let it go. I stared at her, the weight of the journal heavy in my hands. The attic felt close and airless, the dust thick in my throat. I flipped to a marked page, a scrap of paper tucked between the leaves. On it, my brother had written. Found the letter in Dad's desk. Couldn't read all of it, but the words, affair, and paternity, were clear. I'm not who I thought I was. Mom's voice when she says my name, sometimes it sounds like a lie. The words hit me like a punch. My vision swam, my mother's face crumpled. Please, she whispered, don't. But I had to know. Is it true? Was he not Dad's son? She looked away, wiping her eyes. We tried to move on. We tried to give you both a normal life, but your father, he couldn't forgive me. Your brother found out and he couldn't handle it. Her words felt like the air had been sucked out of the room. I looked back at the journal. The last entries were frantic, nearly illegible, the ink smeared. My brother wrote about feeling watched, about everyone lying to him, about wanting to disappear to find the truth for himself. He mentioned a name, someone I didn't recognize. There were notes about a phone call he'd overheard, about meeting someone who knew the real story. I sat hard on the attic floor, the wood cold even through my jeans. My mother knelt beside me, reaching for my hand, her palm warm and trembling. "We loved him," she said. "We love you. None of this was your fault." But I was barely listening. My mind was racing, piecing together every strange argument, every time my brother had looked at us like he was searching for answers we wouldn't give. The box, the key, the journal, the clues weren't just about my brother. They were about all of us. The secret had seeped into every part of our family, poisoning the trust between us. I closed the journal, heart pounding, and looked at my mother. "What do we do now?" I asked. She squeezed my hand, tears slipping down her cheeks. "We tell the truth. We try to heal. That's all we can do." But I wasn't sure it would be enough. Not after everything that had been hidden, all the years lost to silence and suspicion. I stared at the attic window, rain streaking the glass, and wondered where my brother was now, or if he'd ever come home, knowing what he knew. Downstairs, the phone rang, shrill and insistent, slicing through the heavy silence. We both froze. Mom's grip tightened on my hand, her face tense. "Do you think?" I whispered. She shook her head, but her eyes were wide with hope and dread. Neither of us moved, both afraid of what might be waiting on the other end of that call. And even as the phone's ringing echoed through the house, I knew the story wasn't finished. The package had changed everything. But the real mystery, the truth about my brother, and what he'd discovered, was only just beginning. My hands were shaking when I slid the battered journal across the kitchen table to my mom. The morning sun glared through the window, painting streaks across the faded wood, but all I could focus on was her face, how the blood drained from her cheeks as she recognized my brother's handwriting on the cover. I said, "I found this in the package. It's his." My voice was barely more than a whisper, but it cut through the silence like a bell. For a moment, she just stared. The clock on the wall ticked louder than I'd ever noticed, and the refrigerator hummed in the background. Then her fingers, trembling just like mine, reached out and brushed the worn edges. She didn't open it, not yet. "Do you know what's in here?" I asked. It was a stupid question, the answer was obvious. But I needed to hear her say something, anything, that would make sense of the last 2 years. She looked at me, eyes wet but steady. "I always suspected there was more he wasn't telling us," she said quietly. But I didn't want to push. I was scared of what I'd find out. I could see the weight in her posture, the way she hunched over as if trying to shield herself from a storm. I slid the journal closer. "He wrote about Dad, about the night he left. About you, about me, about everything." She finally cracked the cover. The pages fluttered, the scent of old paper and something faintly metallic, blood, or just ink, drifted up. She started reading, lips moving silently, and I watched her relive every sharp word, every slammed door, every moment we'd pretended wasn't important. After a few pages, she closed her eyes. "He always felt like he was the one who had to hold us together after your father left," she said. I think maybe I leaned on him too much. I didn't realize how much he was hurting. I wanted to scream, to ask why no one ever talked about it, but instead, I just pressed my palm to the cool table and listened. My mother ran a hand through her hair, her voice barely audible. "He wrote me a letter once, after he left. I never showed you. I thought it would just make things worse." The air felt thick, like before a thunderstorm. I swallowed hard. "We can't keep doing this. Keeping everything inside. Look where it got us." She nodded, tears finally breaking free. "You're right. I'm sorry. I thought I was protecting you." I looked down at the journal, then back at her. He didn't want to be protected. He just wanted to be heard. We sat in silence, the kind that's heavy but somehow healing. My mother reached for my hand, squeezing it with surprising strength. "Thank you for showing this to me," she said. "I think it's time we talk about everything. No more secrets." That was the first time in years I felt like we could breathe again. The days after that conversation felt different, lighter, but raw. My mom and I sat together most evenings, reading a few pages from the journal at a time. Some entries were angry, almost desperate. Others were hopeful, filled with little drawings and lists of things my brother wanted to do when he came home. Once, I found a sketch of the 4 of us at the beach, my brother's blocky handwriting underneath. "Maybe one day." Some nights, my mom would break down in tears. Other nights, she'd laugh unexpectedly at some memory he'd scribbled in the margins. We didn't talk about forgiveness, not directly, but it was there in the way we listened to each other, in the way we no longer tiptoed around his name. One evening, as cicadas buzzed outside and the kitchen smelled like burnt popcorn, my mom looked at me and asked, "Do you think he'll ever come back?" I hesitated. "I don't know, but I think he wanted us to understand him, even if he couldn't say it face to face." She nodded, wiping her eyes. "We owe him that much." There was a strange kind of peace in not knowing, at least not the whole story. For so long, I'd thought closure meant answers. Now I realized it just meant sharing the burden between us. I kept the journal on my nightstand, sometimes reading a page before bed. The package itself, a battered cardboard relic, sat on my dresser, still smelling faintly of rain and tobacco. I thought about sending a letter to the return address, but there was nothing but a string of numbers in a city I didn't recognize. Then, one afternoon, a text appeared on my phone from an unknown number. Just 3 words. You found it. I stared at the screen, heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I typed back, fingers shaking, "Is this you?" No reply. The message hung there, a thread connecting me to something, or someone, out in the world. I showed my mom, and we sat together on the porch as the sun went down, silent but not afraid anymore. Maybe my brother was still out there, trying to find his own peace. Maybe he wasn't, but for the first time, I felt like our family could move forward, not by forgetting, but by remembering together. I decided to keep the journal close, its pages worn and honest. I didn't need to solve every mystery to start healing. Sometimes, finding the truth is just the beginning of learning how to live with it.